Chapter 1504. The night was filled with darkness, but Xiao Bai's light was like the sun at dawn. It seemed weak, but it was actually full of vitality. Xiao Bai bared his teeth, flames also rose from his body. He turned into a huge fireball, roaring towards the sky. Boom! The flames filled the sky. There was no darkness that could stop it. A scream came out from the darkness. With an unstoppable force, the darkness quickly retreated. Screams immediately sounded out. A figure flew towards Xiao Bai, holding the determination to die, incomparably sorrowful. Stop, don't hurt the ancestor. A desolate yet dignified voice rang out. It actually came from the gigantic creature that was completely enveloped in flames. The ancestor finally spoke, but it was actually to stop the attack of his own people. This greatly exceeded Xiao Bai's expectations. He did not know what the other party was planning. Although he did not understand the ancestor's intention, but all the attacks disappeared in an instant. Everyone retreated like a tide. Dong dong dong. Suddenly, the sound of people kneeling on the ground was deafening. One by one, everyone knelt on the ground, kowtowing to the ancestor, begging, "Ancestor, fight back, don't let them hurt you." The ancestor did not answer. Instead, he ordered the fog, back off, you are not their opponent. No, ancestor. The fog refused with a choked voice. Are you not going to listen to my orders? The fog hesitated, jealously and unwillingly said, yes, ancestor. The fog dissipated, retreated to the edge of the altar, and returned to its original appearance. It could not bear to, but also unwillingly looked at the ancestor. Xiao Bai was also surprised by the ancestor's reaction. Shouldn't they be thinking of ways to kill them? Why did the ancestor not allow them to make a move despite mobilizing so many people? Could it be that the ancestor had masochistic tendencies? Xiao Bai's imagination ran wild. Suddenly, he saw a ray of light fly out from the huge mouth, passing through the raging flames, and stopped beside Xiao Bai. Hidden Profound Sword. This was actually the hidden profound sword that turned into a colorful sword. Xiao Bai was just about to ask what happened to the hidden Xian sword, when the hidden Xian sword shone brightly, and a human figure gradually appeared from the sword light. The man and the sword parted ways. Tang Zheng walked out of the sword again and stared at the ancestor with bright eyes. Xiao Bai looked at him in surprise and impatiently asked, "Master, what's wrong?" According to Xiao Bai's judgment and experience, Tang Zheng did not really hurt the patriarch in the end. He probably stopped at the last moment. This was completely out of Xiao Bai's expectations. According to his judgment, Tang Zheng could definitely gain something and hurt the great ancestor, but he didn't do so. Therefore, this was the strange part. Xiao Bai, just stop. Tang Zheng was serious in speech and manner. His cold eyes seemed to be deep in thought. Just now, at the last moment, the ancestor's actions had completely moved him. The ancestor actually didn't fight with them, but instead allowed them to display their divine might. There must be a secret that no one knew. Tang Zheng didn't want to regret it in the future. At the most critical moment, he stopped Xiao Bai from attacking further. Xiao Bai didn't understand why, but he still quickly stopped. The flames were extinguished in an instant. Just like when flames soared into the sky, they came and went quickly. The ancestor was completely exposed. After the flames were extinguished, the ancestor's body was emitting black smoke, and there were burn marks on his body. In this way, the ancestor seemed to be in a particularly sorry state. He lost a part of his prestige and looked more pitiful. Xiao Bai looked at Tang Zheng suspiciously and asked, "Master, why did you stop? Why did you ask me to stop?" What he meant was, why didn't they quickly take down the ancestor in one go? After all, if they worked together, the ancestor might not be their match. It was very likely that he would be killed in one blow. Wasn't this their goal? Tang Zheng's expression was solemn. He shook his head thoughtfully and said, "Xiao Bai, haven't you seen any clues? The ancestor doesn't want to fight with you. What's the point of dealing with someone who would rather die than fight back? You don't want to fight with me?" Xiao Bai's mind was full of question marks. Why? Tang Zheng also wanted to ask why. Just now, he and the mysterious hidden sword became one, but his perception of the outside world didn't weaken at all. Instead, it became sharper. When he flew into the ancestor's huge mouth, he saw hope. It seemed that he could kill the other party immediately. However, Xiao Bai caught up. When Xiao Bai revealed his true body and used flames, he turned the place into a sea of flames. The others' expressions changed. This wasn't unusual. After all, the strength that Xiao Bai displayed was too shocking. However, the ancestor's reaction was greatly beyond Tang Zheng's expectations, and he couldn't see through it at all. The ancestor would rather die than make a move. There was definitely something fishy about this. He even guessed a little. Xiao Bai was a member of the royal family of the heavens beyond heaven. Could it be that he revealed his true body and used his unique divine ability, so the ancestor recognized him? Was the ancestor related to the royal family? Perhaps it was just like the Scarlet Lunar Beast. However, didn't the Scarlet Lunar Beast swear that the royal family members were all sacrificed? How could there be survivors? He couldn't figure it out at the moment. This was a serious matter, so he didn't continue to attack and take the ancestor's life. Tang Zheng stared at the ancestor and said, "I want to ask him the same question too." "Ancestor, since we've stopped, why don't we talk about it?" The ancestor's small eyes shone with wisdom. He didn't want to look away from Xiao Bai. He said excitedly, "Let me ask you a question first." "I'm the one who asked you first." Xiao Bai said unhappily. The ancestor said carefully, "This is a serious matter. It involves many people and many things. I have to ask you first." Xiao Bai wanted to say something, but he was stopped by Tang Zheng. "Then go ahead and ask." Xiao Bai pouted unwillingly as she spoke, as if she had been greatly wronged. "Are you from another world?" the ancestor asked. The mist frowned in confusion. "Isn't it obvious? These people are outsiders from another world. Is there a need to ask so cautiously?" Tang Zheng understood the meaning behind the ancestor's words. The ancestor didn't mean that they were with the righteous faction and the devil clan. Instead, he was confirming Xiao Bai's identity. "Of course." Xiao Bai answered without hesitation. The patriarch's expression immediately became excited, as if his thoughts had been verified. He then asked, "Your roots are actually in the sky beyond heaven? Are your ancestors from the heavens beyond heaven too?" Xiao Bai looked at him strangely. He understood something and asked curiously, "How did you know?" In other words, he admitted the ancestor's question. "Sure enough, I've said that I'm old and blind. It's been tens of thousands of years, but I still can't forget this scene. Back then, the late emperor used this kind of magical power to fight against strong enemies and became a wise emperor." The ancestor was so excited that he almost spoke incoherently. His whole body trembled as he approached Xiao Bai step by step. His mountain-like body caused the altar to tremble violently. Tang Zheng's heart trembled. His guess was confirmed. This ancestor had an unusual relationship with the royal family. He was most likely an old subordinate of the royal family. To read the latest novel, please visit the website. Chapter 1506. The Great Ancestor quickly approached Xiao Bai. Xiao Bai stared at the Great Ancestor. He was not an idiot. Like Tang Zheng, he had already guessed some clues. He was faintly looking forward to it, and his eyes were shining. After all, he returned to the realm beyond heaven to find his roots and everything about his past. The Great Ancestor's performance indicated that he would achieve part of his goal. At least, the Great Ancestor seemed to have a good understanding of the imperial family. Mi Wu and the others looked like they were possessed. They looked at the Great Ancestor in disbelief, then looked at Xiao Bai. They felt like they were dreaming. Mi Wu and the others had heard too many stories about the imperial family. They were so used to it that calluses almost formed on their ears. According to the Great Ancestor's description, the imperial family was so powerful that no one could compare to them. The whole world submitted to them, and they were like gods. The truth was so. In the original realm beyond heaven, the imperial family were gods. The imperial family's orders were oracles, and no one dared to disobey. In other words, no one dared to disobey. Mi Wu was only surprised by Xiao Bai's extraordinary attack power. She was deeply shocked, especially by Xiao Bai's real body, which shocked them even more. They did not think about the imperial family at all. After all, that was a distant legend. How could they link the two together? At that moment, Mi Wu seemed to understand why the great ancestor's reaction was so abnormal. She was so excited that her throat moved. Her hands trembled involuntarily, and her eyelids twitched. Silence fell. Everyone's eyes quietly fell on Xiao Bai and the great ancestor. They were excited and looked forward to what would happen next. Boom! The great ancestor stopped in front of Xiao Bai. The altar shook violently, but it held on and was not destroyed. Xiao Bai's body was slightly inferior to the great ancestor's, but his aura was not weaker than the great ancestor's. On the contrary, the great ancestor had lowered his aura to dust. Their eyes met. Xiao Bai was the first to ask excitedly, "You know about the imperial family?" "Of course." 2 drops of sparkling and translucent tears fell from those small eyes. The ancestor emotionally said, "Not only do I know about the imperial family, I've even seen the imperial family. However, that was tens of thousands of years ago." "You've seen the royal family? Does that mean you've lived for tens of thousands of years? What is your relationship with the royal family?" Xiao Bai asked directly. "I've lived an ignoble life for tens of thousands of years. I thought I was too ashamed to meet the late emperor. I've let down his trust, and I've let down the title of protector. Who would have thought that the late emperor would pity me and let me see the imperial family again?" The grand ancestor's eyes were already brimming with tears. He looked at Tang Zheng with excitement, longing, awe, and many other emotions. The royal family. Cries of surprise rang out from all around, and their breathing involuntarily quickened. Just now, some people had already thought of some clues, but when they heard these 2 words with their own ears, they were still deeply shocked. Whoosh! Whoosh! Immediately, all eyes were firmly focused on Xiao Bai. Even Wild Dog's eyes could not hide the shock in them, but there was also a hint of realization. He finally understood why the officials would mobilize so many people, changing their usual behavior and using such a thunderous method to deal with the righteous faction. It turned out that their target was not the righteous faction, but Xiao Bai in front of him. He was a member of the imperial family, so the officials had such a big lineup. As for the history of the heavens beyond heaven, the righteous faction had been here for 400 years and more or less knew a little. The current officials were not orthodox, but had seized the former imperial family's country and throne, and then proclaimed themselves emperor. The name was not legitimate, and the words were not smooth. Although tens of thousands of years had passed, and many people had even forgotten that history, but after all, there was a dark history, and it was not honorable. Wild Dog became excited, but his heart could not help but feel uneasy. He did not know if he was lucky or unlucky to be involved with the former imperial family. He was afraid that he would become the target of the current officials. Xiao Bai had already determined that the ancestor was inextricably linked to his own race. Seeing him in tears, he quickly stretched out his front paw and placed it on the ancestor's head. Boom! The ancestor was very excited. His huge body was completely sprawled on the altar, prostrating in front of Xiao Bai, just like how the red lunar beast prostrated in front of Xiao Bai. "You've worked hard." Xiao Bai held it in for a long time, and then said this sentence sincerely, full of emotions. Just this sentence made the ancestor feel that these tens of thousands of years of waiting were worth it. He was speechless, and stammered, I'm sorry. Your Majesty." With the word, Your Majesty, the ancestor had completely acknowledged Xiao Bai's identity and position. He was a surviving member of the imperial family, which meant that he was a prince. The previous emperor was no longer around, so he was naturally the rightful emperor. When the fog heard the word, Your Majesty, her whole body trembled, as if her soul was about to leave her body, but she immediately woke up as if she had just woken up from a dream. With a thump, she knelt on the ground. Boom! 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 Following that, the sound of people kneeling on the ground could be heard one after another. At a glance, everyone was kneeling. Those huge beings were kneeling on the ground, and all of them were deliberately suppressing their auras to the lowest point as they kowtowed to Xiao Bai. A wave of darkness retreated, and a young man appeared, kneeling side by side with the fog. This was the night. As far as the eye could see, there were many black figures. Xiao Bai had 1,000 words to say, but they were stuck in his chest, and he could not say a single word. Although he had experienced something similar to what the red lunar beast did to him, it was a world of difference. After all, there was only one of them at that time, and this time, there was a black mass. There was no way to compare their auras. Xiao Bai. Tang Zheng softly called out to him, and only then did Xiao Bai wake up. His spirit was lifted, and he suppressed the complicated emotions in his heart and said, "Get up." The great ancestor raised his head and looked at Xiao Bai, but he did not get up. The others did not dare to get up either. Xiao Bai's body flashed with a red light, and he turned into his human form. He used both of his hands to support the great ancestor's upper body, and with a sudden burst of strength, the great ancestor could no longer stand, and stood up straight. "Your Majesty, I am ashamed. Don't say such things." Xiao Bai advised, "Let bygones be bygones. After so many years, I am already very surprised to see the people from back then. I am not surprised at all, because I firmly believe that the imperial family will return, and your Majesty will return victorious. It's just that I never thought that I would be able to see this day. I thought that I would never be able to see it again." The great ancestor said. "Just now, you called yourself a protector. Are you one of the protectors from back then?" Xiao Bai's heart skipped a beat, and he asked. In Xiao Bai's memory, there were 2 protectors under the imperial family, and they were like the prime minister in the human world. They were the highest officials under the emperor, and they had great power. The great ancestor nodded heavily. "Yes, I was the right protector from back then. However, I failed to live up to the name of protector, and I did not protect the imperial family well. Furthermore, the word protector has been deeply tarnished by that person." To read the latest novel, please visit Chapter 1507. The word protector has been deeply tarnished by that person. The great ancestor sounded extremely serious when he said that. He was suppressing his anger and hatred, and anyone could tell what he was implying. Tang Zheng and Xiao Bai fell into deep thought at the same time. Who exactly is that person? When the great ancestor saw their puzzled looks, he knew that they did not know much about what happened back then. In actual fact, the great ancestor had always kept that part of history a secret. Although he often mentioned the imperial family to Mi Wu and the others, he never told them the most important thing. Now that he met Xiao Bai, there was no need for the great ancestor to keep it a secret anymore. Mi Wu and the others looked at the great ancestor curiously. They had heard about some related things, but they only knew half of it. In actual fact, they were curious too, but since the great ancestor did not want to tell them, they could only keep their curiosity to themselves. "Your Majesty, it looks like you don't know much about what happened back then. I'll tell you exactly what happened back then so that you'll know how despicable and shameless that person is," the great ancestor said with righteous indignation. His small eyes shone brightly. Xiao Bai nodded and said with a sullen face, "All right, we're all ears." The great ancestor's face darkened. He lifted his head slightly, and his eyes became much more profound as he recalled the past. After a while, he took a deep breath and said slowly, "Although what happened back then was very long ago, I won't forget it for the rest of my life. I'm remembering history, and I'm also remembering some people's dirty tricks." Everyone's attention was attracted at the same time. They widened their eyes and stared at the ancestor. Back then, the realm beyond heaven was governed by the late emperor. The weather was good, and people lived and worked in peace. However, the conspiracy grew quietly in the dark. Nobody noticed anything because we didn't expect that person to commit such a heinous crime. That person was only second to one person in the realm beyond heaven. He was extremely powerful, and he was brewing a huge conspiracy to seize the world. That person was a despicable traitor, and he was the left guardian who tarnished the name of the protector. Tens of thousands of years have passed, but I'm still unwilling to mention that filthy name. Left guardian? Xiao Bai exclaimed in surprise. The memories he inherited only contained the local customs of the realm beyond heaven and the general situation. He didn't know much about the realm beyond heaven. Therefore, when he heard this secret, he was also very shocked. Xiao Bai wasn't the only one who was shocked. The others also came to a sudden realization. So this was the reason why the ancestor didn't want to mention the name of the protector. He was the right protector, and the traitor was the left protector. They were both highly regarded by the late emperor. The left guardian had betrayed the late emperor. As the right guardian, the ancestor seemed to have felt the same way. He felt the same betrayal. Immediately, the mist and the others were filled with righteous indignation. They scolded the left protector for being shameless and despicable. They accused him of his shameless actions. Tang Jing seemed to be deep in thought. He looked at Xiao Bai, then at the ancestor, and said, "Ancestor, what happened back then is already in the past. Let bygones be bygones. Since Xiao Bai is back, let's start anew. Those traitors will receive their due punishment." Due punishment, ha ha ha. The old man laughed. There was an indescribable sense of desolation in his laughter. Tang Jing suddenly frowned and asked curiously, "Ancestor, why are you laughing? What is the due punishment you are talking about?" The ancestor asked. "Of course, it's to make them pay a heavy price. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth." Tang Jing answered firmly. The ancestor shook his head and said in disappointment, "No, no price can make up for this regret. Because, that person is already dead." Dead? Tang Jing opened his eyes wide in surprise and stared at the ancestor. How could he be dead? After all, the ancestor was still alive. That traitor didn't have to worry about food and clothing. He sat on the world. How could he be dead? This didn't make sense. The ancestor looked at Tang Jing with shining eyes. He already understood his thoughts. Yes, this traitor deserved to die. But he died so inexplicably. This caused us to be unable to kill this traitor. So, there is no way to truly take revenge. The ancestor said regretfully. Tang Jing also understood the ancestor's thoughts. His so-called revenge was to kill the traitor with his own hands, not just the traitor's descendant. There was indeed no way to truly take revenge. There was no way to completely resolve this hatred. Tang Jing asked curiously, "How did he die?" The ancestor laughed sorrowfully and said, "Perhaps the heavens were not willing to let this traitor live for a few more years. He died more than 1,000 years after stealing the country." Only 1,000 years? Tang Jing was shocked. After all, in the long river of history, 1,000 years was nothing. These powerhouses had a lifespan of tens of thousands of years. How could they only live for such a short time? The ancestor understood Tang Jing's shock very well and nodded. That year, when I heard this news, I was also very shocked. At one time, I thought that he deliberately released fake news in order to lure our opposition forces to attack the imperial city. After all, after that person died, the imperial city's strength was greatly weakened. The ancestor recalled bits and pieces of that year. They were vivid in his mind as if they had happened yesterday. However, later on, it turned out that we were all wrong. During this period, there were indeed opposition forces who took the opportunity to attack, but in the end, it ended in failure. That traitor never came back to life, nor did he reveal his tracks. The ones who defeated the opposition forces were his descendants. Who would have thought that the traitor's descendants would be so powerful? Tens of thousands of years have passed, but I have never heard of that person. So, I am very sure that he did die back then. The saying, "the wicked will be punished by the heavens." This sentence is really correct. Tang Zheng sighed regretfully. For those who had experienced the events of that year, it was indeed a great pity that they could not kill the traitor with their own hands. Xiao Bai clenched his fists so tightly that his knuckles cracked and turned white. He took a deep breath and suppressed his anger with great difficulty, saying, "Although that traitor is dead, I don't mind finding his descendants to take revenge. This generation will settle the grudges of the previous generation." This was Xiao Bai's fate. From the moment he came to this world, this was a fate that he could not escape. He also did not want to escape. The ancestor's eyes flashed and said, "Your Majesty has great ambitions." If the late emperor knew, he would definitely be content. However, that traitor's descendant, the one who lives in the imperial city today, is very powerful. He is not any weaker than that traitor back then. Before the ancestor finished speaking, everyone already understood the meaning behind his words. This was a thorny matter. To read a novel without mistakes, please visit Chapter 1508. Even so, the great ancestor's confidence did not diminish. He stared at Xiao Bai and said, "Now that His Majesty has returned, no matter how powerful that traitor's descendant is, he won't be His Majesty's match. It's time for us to counterattack." Tang Zheng was not as optimistic as him and said worriedly, "Even so, we must investigate the enemy's situation before we dare to take action. Before that, it's best not to act rashly to avoid alerting the enemy." The great ancestor obviously did not think so and retorted, "What are you saying? His Majesty has returned, and no one can be his match. Why should we be afraid? This is not the imperial family's style." Tang Jing bitterly smiled and said, "Only by knowing yourself and your enemy can you win 100 battles. If we act rashly and something goes wrong, won't it hurt those close to us and delight the enemy?" The great ancestor's face sank and said, "Are you doubting His Majesty's ability?" "Of course not." Tang Zheng said helplessly. "Great ancestor, don't make things difficult for Master. I think what he said is reasonable." Xiao Bai noticed that the atmosphere was a little strange and quickly spoke up for Tang Zheng. "Master? How can you call him Master? His Majesty is a member of the imperial family. The imperial family will not respect anyone as their master. Only others will bow down to the imperial family," the great ancestor said emotionally. He looked at Tang Zheng with a somewhat unfriendly gaze. Tang Zheng was not surprised and had already expected this scene. After all, Qiyu was also like this. He said with familiarity, "Great ancestor, my relationship with Xiao Bai is not something that can be explained in a few words. It's also not something that you can deny with a few words." Before he could finish speaking, the ancestor had already impatiently raised his head high, looking down at Tang Zheng like a tiger eyeing its prey, his pair of small eyes brimming with killing intent. "His Majesty is a member of the imperial family. The dignity of the imperial family cannot be challenged. If you dare to talk nonsense or think nonsense, then don't blame me for being impolite," the great ancestor said sternly. His posture was not fake at all, as if he would attack at any time. Tang Jing smiled bitterly and had no choice but to shut his mouth. Xiao Bai couldn't bear to watch any longer. He solemnly looked at the ancestor and said, "Ancestor, although you are an old official of the imperial family, there is something I must say first. He is my master. I will not allow anyone to provoke him or disrespect him. His words are my words. If you respect me as your Majesty, then you must also respect my master." Xiao Bai's eyes were firm and unquestionable. Even when he met the ancestor's eyes, he did not retreat. The two pairs of eyes looked at each other, their eyes reflecting each other's figures. The ancestor knew the royal family very well. Once the royal family made a decision, even 10 horses could not pull them back. Moreover, the two sides had just met, so there was naturally a difference in their relationship. The elder ancestor believed that in time, His Majesty would believe his words. Being close to virtuous ministers and distancing themselves from petty people was what the royal family should do. He fiercely glared at Tang Zheng, as if to say, "Kid, just you wait. One day, His Majesty will understand my painstaking efforts. At that time, your good days will come to an end." Tang Zheng of course understood the elder ancestor's eyes, but he didn't care. After all, the elder ancestor was also thinking for Xiao Bai. The two were different paths to the same goal. Once he understood this point, then all the problems would be solved. "Yes, Your Majesty." The elder ancestor lowered his head to Xiao Bai and resentfully replied. Xiao Bai nodded with satisfaction and said, "That's more like it." But the fog and the others looked at Tang Zheng with a rather playful gaze. In fact, there was not a trace of kindness in their eyes. The tense situation was resolved, and both sides became amiable. They were invited to a relatively luxurious large house. This house built on the mountain was far more spacious and bright than it looked from the outside. Xiao Bai was warmly invited to this house. Xiao Bai and Wild Dog enjoyed the same treatment and entered the house with Xiao Bai. Wild Dog felt that he had lived his life in vain. He had never encountered something so exciting and full of ups and downs. This time was different. At this moment, he was completely immersed in it and relaxed to the extreme. Because he knew that if he followed Xiao Bai, then there was no need to worry about his safety. The others surrounded the house from afar. Only the fog and dark night followed the elder ancestor into the house. What surprised Tang Jing the most was that after the elder ancestor entered the house, he only shrunk his body slightly and didn't transform into a human form. In fact, if he transformed into a human, it would be more convenient for him to move, and it wouldn't take up so much space. Xiao Bai and Tang Zheng were almost telepathically connected. They had the same idea. He asked curiously, "Elder Ancestor, why don't you transform into a human? It would be more convenient for you to move." Alas! A long sigh sounded from the elder ancestor's mouth. The fog and dark night's eyes dimmed at the same time. Tang Zheng and Xiao Bai noticed each other's abnormality. They couldn't help but feel their hearts hanging in the air. They pricked up their ears to listen to the elder ancestor's answer. "It's not that I don't want to transform into a human, but that I can't." The elder ancestor revealed the mystery in one sentence. "You can't? How can that be?" With the elder ancestor's strength and cultivation, it wasn't difficult for him to transform into a human. After all, his strength was much stronger than the fog and dark night. "Your Majesty, this is the problem we are facing now. Not only me, but other than the fog and dark night, the others can't transform into a human." Hiss. Tang Zheng sucked in a breath of cold air, his gaze landing on the fog and black night. Just what was going on? Why was their situation so bad? Just what was going on? Without Xiao Bai asking, the elder ancestor had already explained. The opposition's fighting strength was deteriorating. This was a subtle change. Perhaps it was a coincidence, but the fog and dark night were much less affected, so they could still transform into humans. Tang Jing thought hard, then a thought flashed through his mind. He pointed at his feet and said, "Could it be a problem with this piece of land? After all, isn't this place called Suicide Valley? This name isn't for nothing, right? There must be a reason." After the battle and careful observation, Tang Jing could already conclude that just these people alone were not enough to make the outside world so fearful of this place. They even gave it the title of Suicide Valley. That could only mean that this land originally contained some kind of great danger, which was why it made people tremble in fear. The elder ancestor looked at Tang Jing in surprise, as if he didn't expect him to tell the truth with a single sentence, as if he understood the Suicide Valley very well. The old ancestor nodded seriously and said, "You guessed right, it is indeed the influence of the Suicide Valley. The Suicide Valley is restricting our abilities bit by bit, causing us to degenerate. If this goes on for a long time, we will die even before the enemy attacks us. But you are still weak and can't fight against the traitors. Therefore, you have no choice but to borrow the power of the Suicide Valley and hide here for the time being." Tang Zheng said bluntly. Hearing this, the ancestor and the others lowered their heads at the same time, unable to hide their shame. Tang Zheng's head trembled, his words were too abrupt. He immediately changed his words and asked the ancestor, "Ancestor, what exactly is the danger of this suicide valley? When we came in just now, what we encountered didn't seem to be too dangerous. The previous danger was almost all caused by the fog." They really didn't have much experience with the dangers of the suicide valley itself. For the latest novel updates, please visit the website. Chapter 1509. What danger was there in the suicide valley? When the ancestor heard this, he couldn't help but fall into deep thought. Fear appeared between the brows of the fog in the dark night. The danger of the suicide valley is definitely not something that can be explained in a few words. This must start from the origin of the suicide valley. The ancestor said slowly. Xiaobai nodded and said, "That's right. Why is there no information about the suicide valley in my memories?" The ancestor said, "Your Majesty, what you have inherited is the memories of the royal family. You only have information about the past of the heavens beyond heaven, and the suicide valley did not exist since ancient times. It was only formed after the betrayal of that traitor." "How did it form?" Xiaobai asked curiously. "Why did the suicide valley become a place of great danger?" "That's because this land has been corroded by poisonous substances. Every blade of grass, every tree, every piece of soil, and every rock is highly poisonous." "Highly poisonous?" Tang Zheng and Xiaobai both shivered at the same time. Their eyes narrowed as they stared at the hard rock beneath their feet. Could it be that the rock beneath their feet also contained poison? But why were they safe and sound? The ancestor looked deeply at the two of them and guessed what they were thinking. However, he was not in a hurry to explain. Instead, he said step by step, "All of this is the traitor's scheme. Back then, he relied on his own strength and those vicious subordinates of his. It was impossible for him to be a match for the late emperor. However, he was too cunning, and the late emperor trusted him so much that he fell into his trap." "What trap?" This was about the history of the royal family. Xiaobai was completely interested. The traitor lied that according to ancient legends, there was a peerless divine weapon hidden under this land. Moreover, it was rumored that this divine weapon was related to the safety of the country. In order to stabilize the country and protect the people of the world, the late emperor led most of his men into this mountain range in an attempt to find the divine weapon. However, no one expected that this was completely the traitor's scheme. This mountain range had long been poisoned, and everyone was infected with the poison. Most of them directly died, and even if they didn't die, after experiencing an endless battle with the enemy, they were all killed and injured. Hiss. After hearing that, Tang Zheng, Xiaobai, and even the wild dog felt a chill in their hearts at the same time. They looked around, as if they had traveled through tens of thousands of years of history and witnessed the bloody battle. Even though they had only heard a few words, they could still feel the tragedy at that time. "I stayed in the imperial city to deal with government affairs and escaped a calamity. I didn't fulfill my duty as a subject and allowed that traitor to take advantage of me," the old ancestor said regretfully. Even the late emperor didn't see through his scheme, and he didn't survive either. "If you go, I'm afraid that the traitor will catch all of you in one fell swoop. Today, I won't be able to hear these secrets of the past." Xiaobai comforted. The old ancestor's eyes lit up as he felt slightly comforted. "Your Majesty, you're wrong about one thing. How could the late emperor be killed so easily? Although the traitor had exhausted all means, the former emperor still managed to successfully leave this place and return to the imperial city. It's just that he was already heavily injured." Xiaobai was shocked. He didn't expect his father to be so powerful. Under the traitor's meticulous scheme, he was still able to escape. The late emperor originally had a chance to recover, but the traitor was too cunning. He immediately sent a group of extremely vicious people to attack the imperial city. In order to protect his subordinates, His Majesty fought to his last breath and saved many of his subordinates, including the Empress and the child in her womb. Xiao Bai became emotional. It turned out that his father had used his own life in exchange for his own. He couldn't understand his father's feelings at that time, but he must have been extremely sad and disappointed. After all, he had been betrayed by the person he trusted the most. His father's country had also been lost in his hands. Xiao Bai clenched his teeth. A ball of flame emerged from his palm and kept rolling. This was a flame of anger, as if it could devour everything. You must have seen the cemetery on your way here. Those are the warriors who followed His Majesty here and fought to their last breaths. Tang Zheng and Little White were suddenly enlightened. Previously, they were still curious about who was buried in the tombs, and the fog kept saying that they were warriors. It turned out that they were all people who were loyal to the imperial family. They were buried here for the imperial family. I will not forget them. In the future, the imperial family will also not forget them. Xiao Bai said with a heavy tone. The old ancestor looked at Xiao Bai with gratification and gratitude. He said emotionally, if they knew of His Majesty's intentions in the underworld, they would have died without regrets. For a moment, the atmosphere became heavy and oppressive. Xiao Bai took a deep breath and broke the silence. He said, Old ancestor, what happened after that? Since this land had already been corroded by poison, why did you come here? Weren't you worried? After the late emperor covered for us to escape, he had no fixed residence and was immediately divided into two factions. Some suggested that we immediately counterattack, while others suggested that we hide, accumulate strength, and plan slowly. I was in the latter faction, while the general was in the first faction. The general? Yes, the general's cultivation was powerful, and he came from the oldest family in the realm beyond heaven, the Red Moon clan. Wait. Before the old ancestor could finish, Tang Jing quickly raised his hand and interrupted him. Old ancestor, the Red Moon clan that you mentioned, are you talking about the Red Moon beast? The old ancestor looked at Tang Jing in shock. He did not expect that an outsider like him would mention the Red Moon beast. After all, it had been tens of thousands of years. Most people in the realm beyond heaven had forgotten about the existence of the Red Moon beast. How do you know? The old ancestor stared at Tang Zheng and asked. Not only do I know, but I have also seen the members of the Red Moon clan. In fact, there is more than one of them. Tang Zheng said in a deep voice. What? The old ancestor stood up and looked down at Tang Zheng. His eyes were wide open as he asked in disbelief, how could you possibly have seen a member of the Scarlet Moon clan? Didn't they all sacrifice themselves? Master is not the only one who has seen them. I have seen them too. Xiao Bai interrupted. You have seen the king as well? Where? The old ancestor was even more shocked. In another world. Perhaps, the general that you mentioned is the one that we have seen. Tang Zheng was deep in his thoughts. The Red Moon beast's identity was not simple. Back then, he came to the human world to look for the queen and the prince. Due to the time and space turbulence, he was separated from his wife. He was sealed forever while his wife fell into Xian Yin's hands. Master, you tell us. Xiao Bai took the initiative to let Tang Jing speak so that the others would listen to him. Tang Jing took the hint and began to talk about how he met the Scarlet Moon beast. Naturally, he also mentioned Xian Yin, causing everyone to perk up their ears and listen with great interest. Chapter 15:10. After Tang Jing finished speaking, there was complete silence. Everyone was reminiscing about the soul-stirring and scheming struggles of the human world. Although only a few words had described the tip of the iceberg, it still made people feel the magnificence and ruthlessness of it. The patriarch heaved a long sigh. That traitor even sent people to another world. In order to stabilize his rule, he really did everything he could. If it weren't for his willful rebellion back then, the realm beyond heaven wouldn't be in such a precarious situation. Since the Red Moon General is not dead, then everything will be easy. Our strength will become stronger. The great ancestor was full of beautiful expectations for the future. Tang Zheng did not feel optimistic. The Red Moon General's strength was greatly reduced when he traveled through space. It will take some time to recover his former strength. The great ancestor did not care at all. I believe the Red Moon General will be able to do it. Tang Zheng helplessly bitterly smiled and bitterly shut his mouth. Fortunately, the Queen's decision was wise. She let me and the Red Moon General each lead a group of subordinates to prepare for both sides. One group followed the general's advice and directly confronted the traitor. The other group led by me went into hiding. Moreover, in order to ensure the safety of both sides are not allowed to contact each other. Otherwise, the enemy would have been powerful and we would have been wiped out by them. The great ancestor sighed. So it was the Queen's idea. Tang Zheng suddenly realized that the Queen's decision was wise. Xiao Bai's father and the Queen were not ordinary people. Their foresight was so accurate. You still haven't told us how you can hide in this place that is eroded by poison? Tang Zheng asked the key question. Xiao Bai also looked at the great ancestor with a curious look. The great ancestor continued, we chose to hide in many places, but we did not find the best place to hide. Later, I missed the warriors who died here and came here to pay respects. However, I accidentally found something strange. What strange? The periphery of this place is highly poisonous. However, once you step into the core area, the poison disappeared as if it was dissolved by some mysterious force. Since the war, this place has changed a lot. It is impossible to fly above the mountain range, so if you want to reach the core area, you have to pass through the ground. With my insignificant abilities, I reached the hinterland with difficulty and entered the core of the battle. I saw the brutality of the battle that day. Corpses were everywhere, and countless former comrades were lying in pools of blood, turning into cold, hard corpses. The great ancestor's eyes involuntarily turned red as if there were tears in them. It was as if he saw the original scene. The grief and shock in his heart could be imagined. Tang Zheng understood the ancestor's feelings very well, but he still had a bellyful of questions that had yet to be answered. For example, what dissolved the poison? Since there was poison outside, why were they not affected when they came in? Why couldn't they fly in this mountain range and could only enter on foot? At the same time, Tang Zheng was also glad that he chose to enter on the ground instead of flying in the air. Otherwise, if he fell into a place filled with poison, he would have died before he could even see the ancestor. Tang Zheng simply threw these questions to the ancestor. The ancestor looked deeply at Tang Zheng, unable to hide his admiration. He thought to himself that this person's vision was unique, his thoughts were meticulous, and he was not simple at all. The ancestor did not hide anything and explained again. In the eyes of the traitor, this place had already become the suicide valley. Moreover, the traitor had killed so many of his former comrades in the trenches. This was his stain, and he did not want to come to this place again. In fact, he did not want anyone else to come to this place either. Then this place would become a place forgotten by the world, a natural shelter. The ancestor and the others gathered everyone's strength and finally managed to pass through the outer poison grounds with great difficulty. They arrived at the hinterland and settled down there. They were self-sufficient and must have lived in seclusion for tens of thousands of years. Unless they occasionally sent spies out to gather information, under normal circumstances, they would never leave the suicide valley. After so many years, the outside world did not discover that the opposition was actually in the suicide valley. As for the rumors of the opposition, the ancestor had purposely let his subordinates spread them out. This was to increase the fear of the traitors and create psychological pressure on them. The ancestor did not wish to see the traitor sit peacefully and enjoy the world. The rumors of the opposition had indeed caused quite a bit of trouble for the enemy. However, they could not find any traces of the opposition even after digging 3 feet into the ground. The more this situation was, the more they felt tormented. This was the effect that the ancestor wanted. He believed that as long as he did not reveal anything, the enemy would definitely not be able to guess where they were hiding. It was a complete accident that the wild dog found out that the opposition was hiding in the suicide valley. This kind of situation had never happened before. After all these years of analysis and research, the ancestor already had some insights into why the Suicide Valley would automatically dissolve the poison. He remembered the rumors about the divine armament back then. This matter was not groundless. That was why the traitor was able to deceive the late emperor. Otherwise, with the late emperor's intelligence and wisdom, it would be impossible for him to fabricate a lie out of thin air to successfully deceive him. The changes in the Suicide Valley might be inextricably linked to the mysterious divine armament. In addition, the things that happened in the past few years also confirmed the ancestor's guess. That was, there were more and more places in the Suicide Valley that had been dissolved by the poison, and the area that could be inhabited was expanding bit by bit. Now, only the outermost area was still poisonous. The fog could transform into fog, and the night could transform into darkness. They could effectively avoid the effects of the poison. Therefore, they had been taking turns to monitor the situation outside the Suicide Valley. Not a single movement could escape their eyes. All of this should be the effect of the divine armament. In the long run, all the poison will be dissolved, and we will be in danger of being exposed. In addition, our strength is deteriorating, and it might be related to the divine armament. I have been thinking of a solution recently. The crux of all this is the divine armament. If we can find the divine armament, perhaps all of this can be solved. The ancestor said in distress. All of this came down to the divine armament. Tang Zheng had already come into contact with many divine armament. His heart skipped a beat. Could he find this divine armament? Chapter 15:11. Seeing that everyone's eyes were focused on him, Tang Zheng thought for a while, and then said without giving in, I don't have full confidence in finding this divine armament, but I can give it a try. Will it really succeed? The ancestor asked nervously and expectantly. Xiao Bai said without hesitation, of course, Master is very resourceful. Not to mention finding a divine armament, he can do even more difficult things. In Xiao Bai's eyes, Tang Zheng was practically synonymous with omnipotence. Tang Zheng didn't know whether to laugh or cry when he heard this. He better not let down Xiao Bai's trust, otherwise, he would really make a fool of himself at that time. The ancestor and the others were clearly skeptical. Moreover, there were a lot of doubts. Unknowingly, the sky was getting brighter. The Suicide Valley woke up from its slumber and gradually regained its vitality. Since they were looking for the divine armament, they had to have a comprehensive and detailed understanding of the Suicide Valley. Thus, the group left the waterfall and walked back to the bottom of the sky. The waterfall was right behind them. The waterfall was still black, and under the illumination of the morning sun, it gave off a different kind of radiance. What's going on with this waterfall? Why is it black? Tang Zheng asked curiously. The ancestor glanced at the waterfall and said, this waterfall was contaminated by poison back then and has always contained a highly toxic poison. If you drink a little, you will die on the spot. This waterfall is equivalent to our last line of defense. If we have no other choice and are discovered by the enemy, it will be very difficult for the enemy to break through this waterfall if we can't avoid it. But if that's the case, it will become a situation of certain death. There will be no way out. If the enemy continues to surround us, we will easily be trapped to death. Tang Zheng spoke bluntly, pointing out the shortcomings in an instant. The ancestor blushed and said resentfully, we know this as well. This is our last resort. Tang Zheng immediately realized that he was being too abrupt and said embarrassedly, Ancestor, I was just saying it casually. Don't mind it. The ancestor rolled his eyes and said, do you think I would be so petty? The fog also chimed in, the ancestor is magnanimous, why would he care about these few words? That's true. Tang Zheng echoed with a smile. The ancestor really didn't care. He continued to answer Tang Zheng's question and said, when the waterfall was opened last night, you must have seen the changes in the waterfall. When the waterfall is divided into two, the black water will become incomparably clear. This is the only time when the waterfall is not poisonous. How can a waterfall not be poisonous? This time, Xiao Bai couldn't help but ask in surprise. One moment it was highly toxic, the next it wasn't. It was indeed confusing. Xiaobai nodded and said, I haven't figured it out yet. Only when the waterfall is opened will it be poisonous. Then why did you think of opening the waterfall? Miwu said worshipfully, this is all thanks to the ancestor. When we first arrived here, we didn't have a place to stay. It was the ancestor who suddenly thought of something and used his divine ability to open this waterfall. That's how we were able to live here and shelter ourselves from the wind and rain. Patriarch, you're truly amazing. Xiaobai praised. Looking at Xiaobai's sincere eyes, the elder ancestor's face turned even redder. He said embarrassedly, Your Majesty is too kind. Actually, there is something I haven't told everyone. What is it? It's very absurd to say, but it wasn't my sudden idea. Instead, I had a dream. There was a voice in the dream and that voice told me how to open the waterfall. The elder ancestor's words were earth-shattering, causing everyone to be shocked. It was actually a dream that told him the method. Dreaming was very normal, but the key was that the dream came true, which was very unusual. Miwu could hear the sound of his heart breaking. This wasn't the elder ancestor's credit, but that dream's credit. In order to maintain this group, the elder ancestor had to make everyone trust his strength. That was why he didn't dare to say it directly. Otherwise, if others questioned his strength, this group would easily fall apart. Now that His Majesty had returned, this problem no longer existed. That was why he could say it so calmly. A dream. Tang Zheng muttered to himself. His eyes couldn't help but fall on the waterfall. Every time the waterfall is opened, the water from the waterfall that isn't poisonous is available for us to drink. This ensures our survival. The elder ancestor continued to talk non-stop. Later on, I tried to recall this dream, but I could only remember that voice and not anything else. I've studied the waterfall for countless years, but I still can't figure it out. I don't know where that voice came from. Moreover, since then, I've never had a similar dream again, and I've never heard that voice again. This is really strange. Xiaobai nodded. He looked at Tang Zheng and said, Master, did you find anything? Tang Zheng shook his head and said, Since we found something suspicious, then let's start from the waterfall. Everyone suspects that the antidote to the poison is that divine weapon. When this waterfall is opened, it can automatically purify the poison. It is very likely that it is inextricably linked to that divine weapon. So, it is most suitable to start from the waterfall. Miwu rolled his eyes and said, You said that you will start from the waterfall, but do you think you will have any results? The elder ancestor has studied it for many years without any results. Don't think that with just a few words and a silver tongue, you will have any results. Miwu had always been prejudiced against Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng ignored her ridicule and said indifferently, Whether or not there will be any results, we will only know after we try. Then we will see you try. Tang Zheng was also eager to try. Let's try, who's afraid of who? Retreating in the face of difficulties is not my, Tang Zheng's, style. He walked straight to the waterfall. There was a deep pool under the waterfall. It was like a big bottle of ink, incomparably dark. He walked around the deep pool. The waterfall did not have any strange smell. Other than the color, it was no different from ordinary water. He reached his hand into the water. Miwu exclaimed, Are you trying to commit suicide? That water is highly poisonous. Tang Zheng smiled without turning his head and said, Of course I know. He had encountered many kinds of water. The water of the river Styx in the ghost realm and the water of the sea of bitterness. He had turned the danger into safety every time. Moreover, water was the source of life. It could reflect many things. His hand stopped a few millimeters away from the surface of the water, and a strange feeling immediately spread to his palm. Poison. He immediately determined. This poison was really strong. Before he even came into contact with it, he actually had a reaction. He did not retract his hand. This bit of poison could not hurt him. He turned around and looked at other places. This was the hinterland of the Suicide Valley. The other places had been purified and did not have any poison. Only this waterfall still had poison. This was especially different. If you can't see it, then stop pretending. If it was that simple, why would you wait so many years? Mi Wu said jokingly, attacking Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng smiled slightly and did not care. Mi Wu! The elder ancestor shouted. Mi Wu curled his lips and finally did not dare to do it again. Chapter 15:12. Plop. A splash appeared in the deep pool. Everyone stared at the splash with their mouths agape. Ah! Exclamations rang out. No one had expected this. Tang Zheng had actually jumped into the deep pool. One had to know that the water was highly poisonous and was extremely harmful to people. Even if one's strength was profound, it would still affect them to a certain extent. Xiao Bai was also shocked by this unexpected scene. He hurriedly rushed to the edge of the pool, as if he wanted to jump in as well. Your Majesty, you mustn't. The ancestor quickly stopped Xiao Bai. He was incomparably anxious. Your Majesty, this deep pool contains highly toxic poison. You mustn't be rash. But Master has already jumped in. If I don't go down and investigate, how can I be at ease? If anything happens to him, then I can't be by his side to protect him. I can't absolve myself from the blame. Xiao Bai said with grief. Although the ancestor had already expected Xiao Bai's loyalty to Tang Zheng, he was still deeply shocked when he heard his words. This loyalty far exceeded his expectations. As a high and mighty and incomparably proud member of the royal family, shouldn't he ask others to express their loyalty to him? How could he be so loyal to others? The ancestor's worldview was almost overturned. Since Tang Zheng was temporarily not here, the ancestor felt that as an old official, whether it was for the sake of the royal family or the late emperor, he had the obligation and responsibility to remind His Majesty of this point. The royal family's dignity was inviolable. Your Majesty, you mustn't. You're a member of the royal family. You're His Majesty. How can you put yourself in danger? The ancestor persuaded earnestly. Before he could finish, Xiao Bai had already rudely interrupted his words. Ancestor, you don't have to say any more. He's my master. For him, I'm willing to sacrifice my life. How can I stop at a mere deep pool? Xiao Bai cleverly went past the ancestor and tried to jump into the deep pool. How could the ancestor ignore him? He hooked his claws and stopped him. When the fog and the night saw this, they hugged Xiao Bai at the same time. At this moment of life and death, the two of them could not care less about the crime of offending their superiors. Xiao Bai was restrained and roared angrily, "Let go of me. Your Majesty, we are all thinking for you." The three of them said earnestly. I can be responsible for my own decisions. I don't need you to tell me what to do. Besides, don't you all respect me as His Majesty? How dare you disobey my orders? Xiao Bai was flustered and exasperated. He never thought that they would try so hard to stop him. Wasn't this preventing him from being loyal to his master? This was framing him for being heartless and unjust. Xiao Bai was an indomitable spirit. How could he be a heartless and unjust rascal? The two sides were in a stalemate. One side was trying hard to jump into the deep pool, while the other side was desperately holding on to him. The wild dog witnessed this scene with his mouth agape. His worldview was deeply subverted. He could not help but have thousands of words to say in his heart. What did that Tang Zheng do to make His Majesty so loyal to him? Was there some kind of drug? The wild dog's imagination ran wild. He did not know how this farce would end. Your Majesty, if you jump into the deep pool, we'll jump in with you. Anyway, if something happens to Your Majesty, we won't be able to live in this world anymore. In the end, the ancestor had no choice but to use a trump card. Coercion and bribery. Little White immediately gave up struggling. It looked at the patriarch with reddened eyes, and its eyes involuntarily turned red. He could understand the ancestor's motives and thoughts, but the ancestor could not know his true thoughts and his unusual feelings for Tang Zheng. That was why all these differences were caused. Boom! A loud noise came from the deep pool, interrupting this scene. They all turned their heads to look at the deep pool, their eyes firmly attracted. Gurgle. The deep pool began to boil like boiling water. Dense black gas spiraled up into the sky like smoke from a kitchen chimney. It had a unique charm. What had happened in the deep pool? How could there be such a change? Countless questions popped up in everyone's mind, especially the ancestor. He had observed the deep pool for tens of thousands of years and had never seen such a strange scene. How could Tang Zheng do it? No one knew the danger Tang Zheng had experienced. He was almost walking along the gates of hell. If he was careless, he would definitely die. Just now, he took the risk to jump into the deep pool. It was not on a whim. He was definitely not seeking his own death. When he placed his hand on the surface of the pool, he not only felt the strong poison, but also a trace of the special characteristics of the pool water. Different types of water had similar special characteristics, and this pool water was no exception. It had many of the special characteristics of water. If it were anyone else, they would definitely be helpless. But Tang Zheng was different. He cultivated the dragon god art and had truly transformed into a dragon. He had a true dragon avatar, so his understanding of water was far superior to ordinary people. After all, the dragon clan was able to control the clouds and rain, and they liked to live in the water. They were very sensitive to water. He took full advantage of this advantage. His divine sense entered the water and spread along the water droplets, quickly spreading deeper into the deep pool. His divine sense spread deeper and deeper. Fortunately, his divine sense was strong enough, and because he was a dragon, he had a natural affinity with water. His ability to control water was very strong, so his divine sense could reach a depth that others could not reach. This deep pool was really bottomless, as if there was no end. It made people feel a sense of loss. Was there any meaning in doing this? Fortunately, he was confident in his own judgment, which was why he persevered and continued to explore. Suddenly, bang! A mysterious force rebounded from the deep pool and fiercely hit his divine sense. It was as if his divine sense had encountered a spring and was quickly bounced away. Tang Zheng did not give up. Instead, his eyes lit up as if he had discovered a new continent. If there was no reaction, he might have given up. But since there was a mysterious force rebounding his divine sense, it meant that there was something strange in this deep pool. But divine sense was divine sense after all, and could not replace a real person to explore. Moreover, once his divine sense entered the deep pool, it would be rebounded by the mysterious force. There was no way to go any further, and there was no way to obtain more information. In this way, no matter how he tried, there would not be much effect. Therefore, he decided to take the risk and jump into the deep pool himself. He would personally go to the bottom of the pool to explore. Maybe the divine weapon would be at the bottom. Of course, he was not completely reckless and did not care about his own life. He had other considerations. He was already a member of the dragon clan, and his ability to control water was absolutely first class. The pool water was highly toxic, but he could completely use the dragon clan's magical power to completely resist the corrosion of the pool water and isolate the toxicity, so he would not be hurt. Chapter 15:13. When Tang Zheng entered the water, the surrounding poison quickly gathered in his body, trying to erode every cell and nerve in his body. 10:8. However, Tang Zheng hurriedly activated the dragon god technique. A bubble immediately appeared around him, firmly enveloping him and isolating him from all the poisonous water. Tang Zheng was slightly stunned. When he was in the South Sea, although he was like a fish in water, there was no such bubble. Could it be that this kind of change occurred after the dragon god technique was promoted to a certain realm? He did not guess wrongly. This was the miraculous change that would occur after the dragon god technique reached a certain realm. When he sensed the surrounding poison, the water avoidance pearl automatically produced, isolating all the threats around him, allowing him to be safe and sound. The others were not dragons, so of course they could not do all this. Even a powerhouse like the ancestor could not do anything. A pleasant surprise. Tang Zheng was relieved and quickly dived down. The pressure of the water did not cause him any trouble at all. He dove down like a fish in water. From the outside, the pool did not look deep, but once he went down, he could not see the bottom. Tang Zheng's speed was extremely fast. After diving for a long time, he still did not reach the bottom. He was not worried. After all, he had probed with his divine sense before and knew the general situation. Moreover, his divine sense was not idle now and had already probed down. Bang! Suddenly, his divine sense was bounced back. He was overjoyed. He had reached his destination. A faint light came from below. He could not help but squint his eyes slightly. Before he could stand firm, this light flew towards him with a whoosh. It was very sharp, causing people to involuntarily feel a chill in their hearts. He did not panic and quickly stabilized his mind. A golden light flew out from his palm and hit the light fiercely. Unexpectedly, the energy contained in this light was extremely domineering. Boom! With a loud sound, a surging wave of water tilted out from the point of impact. In the blink of an eye, the wave rushed to the surface of the water and splashed up huge waves. This movement was very loud and immediately attracted the attention of others. They all turned their heads to look over. Xiao Bai anxiously cried out, "Master!" After a slight pause, he shouted again, "I'm going to save Master." Old Rent hurriedly gave a look to the fog and dark night. The three of them held on to Xiao Bai tightly, not giving him a chance to break free. "Your Majesty, you can't do that." The ancestor begged with tears in his eyes. The situation in the deep pool was unclear, and they didn't know the dangers. How could they let Xiao Bai go down without doing anything? If anything happened to him, they would not be able to redeem themselves even if they died 10,000 times. Xiao Bai struggled in despair. His eyes were filled with despair, but he knew very well that he really couldn't save anyone. He thought to himself, "Master, you've always been able to turn danger into safety. I hope you can create a miracle this time as well." Yes, Master will definitely succeed. Tang Zheng's situation was indeed very dangerous. As for whether he could turn the situation around, it was still unknown. The wave from before had completely disappeared, and before he could take another look, an even more powerful surge of energy surged towards him. He hurriedly circulated his energy to resist, but at this moment, the force had completely enveloped him. Ka-cha! The water avoidance pearl had actually shattered. This scene was unexpected. His mind went blank for a moment, and then he knew that this meant that there was a huge danger. He wanted to activate the Dragon God mantra and create a new water avoidance pearl, but it was already too late. Thus, he could only fight back. Puff! The light that contained surging power had already completely enveloped him. His body felt as if it had been slashed by a sharp blade. A wound appeared on the surface of his skin, but no blood flowed out. Tang Zheng cultivated the chaotic Vajra spell and had an indestructible body. It was almost impossible for him to get external injuries, but this time, he was indeed injured. Although there was no bleeding, only a wound was left on his body. This was no longer a normal situation. He was obviously stunned for a moment. He understood that he had underestimated the other party. His nerves were greatly stimulated, and all his hair stood on end. The poison in the water was like a cat that smelled blood. It found a breakthrough and crazily surged towards the wound. The poison immediately seeped into his body from the wound. This poison was indeed extraordinary. No wonder it was able to defeat the imperial family back then. Tang Zheng felt that his brain seemed to have slowed down a little. It was just the beginning, yet there was already such a huge reaction. It was almost unimaginable. He stabilized his mind and circulated the chaotic Vajra spell. His entire body glowed with a golden light, and the wound quickly healed, preventing the poison from further harming his body. Immediately after, the strange feeling in his brain was dispelled, and he quickly returned to his peak state. Swish! Sword light. The hidden profound sword in his hand released a huge amount of power, and the sword light slashed towards the ball of light. Before the hidden profound sword could hit, its speed had actually slowed down a little. This was because the surrounding water had become countless times thicker, like cement, showing signs of rapidly solidifying. Then, how powerful was the hidden profound sword? Sword light surged. Bang bang bang. The surrounding water was stirred up into pieces and returned to its original state. The hidden profound sword broke free from its restraints and quickly, ruthlessly, and accurately struck the center of the ball of light. Clang! The sound of metal clashing suddenly rang out. It was deafening, comparable to a thunderclap. A powerful shockwave quickly spread out from the point of impact. He had no choice but to quickly retreat towards the surface of the water. He had no way to stabilize his body. It could be seen how terrifying the shockwave was. Hua! He splashed out the water and rushed into the air before stopping. He looked down at the deep pool from above. It was so small, but it actually had such a huge impact on him. It was truly unexpected. When the others saw him splash out the water, they were shocked. Xiao Bai could not hide his excitement and blurted out, "Master." Tang Zheng's gaze fell on Xiao Bai. He understood the anxiety in his eyes, and comforted him, "Xiao Bai, don't worry." Xiao Bai nodded his head heavily, and said ecstatically, "I knew Master would be safe and sound." The corner of Tang Zheng's mouth squeezed out a bitter smile. He was not really safe and sound, he was even injured by the light just now. The ancestor was already dumbstruck as he muttered to himself, "Impossible. Impossible. How could he be safe and sound?" It was not that no one had ever thought of going to the bottom of the water to investigate, but not long after entering the water, they were poisoned and lost their lives. The ancestor had once used his divine sense to enter the water to investigate, but his divine sense was not as strong as Tang Zheng's because Tang Zheng cultivated the Ksitigarbha Sutra, which was a divine ability that specialized in cultivating the soul and divine sense. Therefore, his soul and divine sense were much stronger than many experts. The ancestor's divine sense was not able to investigate the ball of light, but Tang Zheng did. It was precisely because of these factors that the ancestor and the others were so shocked. This was truly a slap in the face. Tang Zheng alone was able to defeat the ancestor and the others. Chapter 15-14. Other than Xiao Bai, everyone else was exclaiming in their hearts that it was impossible, but the truth was right in front of them. There was no way to deny it. Splash! Another sound of water splashing rang out, interrupting their thoughts. A ball of light flew up from the water, heading straight for Tang Zheng. Swoosh swoosh! The sword light suddenly appeared and hit the other party, the intense light even eclipsing the sunlight in the sky. Hiss! Everyone sucked in a cold breath. Previously, no one had seen the battle clearly, but now that they saw it with their own eyes and experienced it for themselves, they all felt their hearts tighten. This seemingly simple attack contained a terrifying power that was too frightening. Only now did they truly experience Tang Zheng's astonishing strength. The great ancestor had already fought with Tang Zheng, so he knew very well how powerful he was. But he stared without blinking, wanting to know more about Tang Zheng. In addition, he wanted to know more about that ball of light, the thing that he had always ignored. He couldn't help but feel ashamed, asking himself, why did he overlook such an obvious thing in the past? Moreover, it was right in front of him. He was almost certain that the ball of light was definitely related to the divine weapon. Since that was the case, then he couldn't let it escape. Where do you think you're going? The great ancestor roared, letting go of Xiao Bai, and flew towards the ball of light. Whoosh! A sharp gust of wind blew, and the great ancestor's huge body pounced towards the ball of light. The ball of light was extremely sensitive, and immediately reacted, understanding that it was in danger. The ball of light turned around and flew towards the deep pool. Xiao Bai's eyes widened, and he shouted, "Don't run." The ball of light ran even faster, and in the blink of an eye, it was on the surface of the water, and in the next second, it would fall into the water. Once it entered the water, it wouldn't be so easy to deal with. Tang Jing knew this very well, so he instantly became one with the sword. His figure disappeared, becoming one with the hidden mysterious sword. The ball of light was fast, but the hidden mysterious sword was even faster. The moment the ball of light entered the water, the hidden mysterious sword finally caught up with it. Clang! Another heavy blow, and a huge whirlpool immediately appeared on the surface of the water, the whirlpool spinning counterclockwise. The ball of light, however, did not delay in the slightest. It swayed and fell into the water, its light dimming a little. Tang Zheng's figure reappeared, holding the dark concealment sword in his hand. He stood in the air, unwillingly looking at the ball of light disappearing into the water. The patriarch missed and looked at the water surface in disappointment. Tang Zheng glared at him in annoyance. If he hadn't been so rash, he wouldn't have scared off the ball of light. The ball of light clearly had its own consciousness. This divine weapon could very well be a divine weapon. Only a divine weapon would have a weapon spirit and consciousness. The old ancestor felt uncomfortable under Tang Zheng's stare and resentfully turned his head to the side. When the others saw this, they couldn't defend the old ancestor. Because this was indeed his responsibility. "What do we do now?" the ancestor asked in embarrassment. Tang Zheng took a deep breath and said, "It played hide and seek with me, but it found the wrong target. Since it wants to play underwater, then I'll play with it to the end." The ancestor's eyes lit up, and he no longer doubted what he said. Tang Zheng indeed had the strength to say such words. Xiao Bai finally took the opportunity to break free and shouted, "Master, I'll help you." The old ancestor's face suddenly changed. These words made his heart hang in suspense. He was afraid that if Tang Zheng agreed, then Xiao Bai would be in a dangerous situation. Tang Zheng could go into the water, but that didn't mean that Xiao Bai could too. It was indeed so. Tang Zheng was very clear that he could come and go freely in the water, relying on his dragon body. Xiao Bai was good at controlling fire. After entering the water, it would not be good for him. If something happened to him, then it would be too late for him to regret. Thus, he waved his hand and said, "You stay here and watch for me. Watch me go down and pull it out." When the ancestor heard this, he felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted off his shoulders. He gasped for air. Immediately, he felt that Tang Zheng seemed to be more pleasing to the eye. Xiao Bai was helpless and looked at Tang Zheng with pleading eyes. Tang Zheng was indifferent. He looked deeply at Xiao Bai and rushed into the water without hesitation. The others' hearts were in suspense. They stretched their necks and looked at the deep pool. Tang Zheng dived into the depths and immediately saw the ball of light not far away. The ball of light also noticed him and seemed to be very vigilant. It didn't immediately attack. The two sides were getting closer and closer. The ball of light seemed to have confirmed that it was Tang Zheng. As soon as he entered the water, the ball of light immediately released a dazzling light and flew straight towards Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng shivered, understanding what this meant. He raised the hidden profound sword. The sword light was like a blazing sun, attacking the ball of light. Clang clang clang, a series of collisions sounded incessantly. Pillars of water shot up into the sky from the water. The deep pool seemed to have turned into a fountain. Everyone was shocked by the pillars of water. Their expressions changed, and even their breathing became hurried. The battle under the water was so intense. No one knew how the battle would turn out. Both sides had already exchanged dozens of blows, but they were actually evenly matched. Tang Zheng was obviously at a disadvantage. He was unable to use the water avoidance pearl. His body was in close contact with the poisonous water. The poisonous water's effect on him was getting stronger and stronger. "I can't go on like this. Otherwise, I will die in the hands of the other party," he thought silently in his heart. In a hurry, he came up with a plan. With a shake of his body, a huge change happened to his body. He released a golden light that filled the bottom of the deep pool. A huge dragon's might spread from the bottom of the pool. Not long after, it completely surged out from the water. The old ancestor and the others had never seen a dragon before. Naturally, they had never felt the dragon's might. It was the first time in their lives that they felt the dragon's might. Everyone's heart seemed to stop. This dragon's might was far superior to Tang Zheng's aura. It gave people a feeling that they could not match up to it. The old ancestor's face was pale. He thought that it was released by the ball of light. He subconsciously thought that Tang Zheng was in danger. He swallowed his saliva and said with difficulty, "Your Majesty, I'm afraid he's in danger." Xiao Bai rolled his eyes. How could he not understand the old ancestor's thoughts? He said disapprovingly, "You guessed wrong. This is Master's aura and not that ball of light." What? His aura? Why did he change so much in the blink of an eye? The old ancestor was so shocked that he almost doubted his life. He had never seen or heard of such a change. Xiao Bai did not explain further. After all, the matter of the dragon race was a secret. If he could not disclose it to the public, then he would try his best not to. Tang Zheng had truly transformed into a dragon. His huge body almost occupied all the space at the bottom of the pool. He also blocked the escape route of the ball of light. At the same time, the water level of the deep pool rose by a large amount. After transforming, Tang Zheng clearly felt that his perception of water had become more sensitive. Moreover, the poison that originally posed a great threat to him had actually lost its effect. Yes, the dragon race had a natural affinity with water. Without the protection of the water avoidance pearl, the poisonous water would not be able to harm him. The pieces of glittering golden scales were like a set of armor, protecting him completely. Chapter 15:15. The ball of light also felt the terrifying dragon power, and seemed to understand the joy in the pair of huge dragon eyes, and realized that something was wrong. But the way out was completely blocked by the dragon body, and the ball of light had no way to escape. Woo woo. There was a strange cry from the ball of light, as if there was a life calling. Hey, is it like the hidden mysterious sword, and the spirit is calling? Tang Zheng pondered. The hidden mysterious sword seemed to feel the threat of the cry, and also made a sharp sword sound, responding to the ball of light. The huge dragon claw gently stroked the hidden mysterious sword, and the sword sound became louder, as if it could not wait to compete with the ball of light. Good, then come. Tang Zheng raised his head and shouted. The hidden mysterious sword was connected to his mind, and naturally understood what he meant. It released a blazing light, and with an unparalleled momentum, it slashed downward. The ball of light immediately reacted, and the light that was much dimmer suddenly lit up, and was not inferior to the hidden mysterious sword at all. Woo! Whoosh! The two beams of light quickly collided with each other. At this moment, the sun seemed to explode, and a dazzling light burst out from the bottom of the deep pool. Boom! There was an earth-shattering sound, and the earth trembled. The hard rocks around were like tofu, cut into pieces, and then quickly collapsed. The deep pool completely collapsed, and its appearance changed greatly. It expanded outward several times, and the small pool became a lake. The moment the pool collapsed, the others had already flown in all directions to avoid being contaminated by the poisonous water. The black water rippled, and the scene was very shocking. The waterfall that fell from the sky quickly replenished the water, and filled the small lake that had just formed. Everyone looked at the scene in shock, and were deeply shocked. Their eyes were attracted to the lake at the same time, and there were rays of light coming from below, breaking through the water, and one after another, cutting open the water surface, and a huge whirlpool appeared on the lake. Look! Xiao Bai had sharp eyes, and pointed to the whirlpool and shouted. Swish! 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 Everyone looked at the whirlpool, and in an instant, they opened their eyes wide, and saw an unusual scene. A change occurred in the center of the whirlpool. A ball of clear water bubbled up like a spring. What's going on? The ancestor had lived by the waterfall for 10,000 years, but he had never seen such a scene. It was really an eye-opener. Xiao Bai chuckled, of course it's a good thing. After all, Qingshui is better than Blackwater. The clear spring water seemed to have a magical power. It rapidly expanded outwards, diluting the rest of the black water. The black color faded, and finally, it became transparent. Does this mean there's no poison? Xiao Bai pointed at the clear water and asked. The ancestor nodded subconsciously because the clear water was no different from ordinary drinking water. They witnessed the purification of the poisonous water with their own eyes. It was not like the sudden change when the waterfall parted, but a gradual change. There was a big difference between the two, as if it meant something. This mysterious feeling lingered in everyone's hearts, but there was no way to verify it. No one dared to throw themselves into the clear water and test it out. Moreover, the situation under the water was unknown, and no one was in the mood to test the water. They stretched out their necks, trying to see the situation under the water. They only saw balls of light flickering, two forces intersecting with each other, fighting back and forth. It was incomparably intense. Under the water, the ball of light became weaker and weaker. They could vaguely see the true appearance of the ball of light. After this bitter battle, Tang Jing could already confirm that the ball of light was a divine weapon. As for the true appearance of the divine weapon, he could not guess for the time being. Boom! With a loud sound, the hidden profound sword once again slashed on the ball of light. The ball of light trembled violently a few times, and the light became weaker. The pair of huge dragon eyes suddenly shrank and grinned. Haha, let's see how long you can last. Swish. Swish. In fact, Tang Zheng was very clear that the hidden profound sword was because of his support, so its power increased greatly. But this ball of light was relying on its own consciousness to fight. Comparing the two, the difference was obvious. The hidden profound sword obviously had the upper hand, which was why it was gradually suppressing the ball of light. Tang Zheng was secretly delighted, and once again waved the hidden profound sword. Just at this time, the ball of light was completely extinguished, like a light bulb. The key was pressed. The bottom of the water dimmed a lot. Tang Zheng subconsciously stopped. The hidden profound sword was raised high, but did not descend. He curiously stared at the ball of light that had completely dimmed. No, it was no longer light, but a black ball of light. Shaking his dragon tail, he leaned forward, trying to see the opponent's true appearance. Boom! Just at this time, as if lightning flashed and thunder roared, the black ball of light burst out with a never-before-seen dazzling light, almost making people forget the concept of time. Tang Zheng only felt pain on his body. Puff! A piece of scale armor was cut off, and fresh blood gushed out, dyeing the surrounding water red. The surrounding water did not become clear like the surface of the water. Instead, it was still as black as ink, stained with blood. The ink was mixed with traces of bright red, which was especially dazzling. Hiss! Tang Zheng subconsciously sucked in a breath of cold air. His dragon eyes were wide open, like two lanterns hanging high up in the air. A dazzling golden light shot out from his pupils, shining towards the bottom of the water. A wave of dizziness stimulated his brain, and his heart trembled. He understood that this was the effect of the poison in the water. This time, the poison was clearly even stronger, as if it had condensed all the poison in the pool and entered his body through the wound. One had to know that Tang Zheng had originally cultivated the primal chaos Vajra spell and had an indestructible body. Furthermore, because he had transformed into a dragon, his entire body was covered in scales, making him even more impregnable and almost impossible to harm. However, there were always exceptions to everything, and there was no way to be absolutely safe. The ball of light continued to release all of its power, exploding with the most powerful attack. Then, Tang Zheng was in a miserable state. He was actually injured, and his blood flowed out, causing the poison to enter his body. Since you're so cunning and want my life, then don't even think about having an easy time. Tang Zheng slashed at the ball of light with his sword, causing it to dim once again. The ball of light seemed to have suffered quite a bit of impact, and quickly sank to the bottom of the water. Tang Zheng's blood was aroused, and he did not give up. With a shake of his dragon tail, he chased after him. With a sweep of his dragon claws, he firmly controlled the ball of light. A certain amount of weak light was simply unable to cover its body, and the blood on the dragon's body flowed along the dragon claws to the ball of light. Chapter 15-16. The blood and light merged together, and the struggling of the ball of light immediately ceased. Unknowingly, Tang Zheng heard a voice. "Let go of me." Huh? Tang Zheng's anger subsided a lot. The voice was so clear and different from before. He guessed that something must have happened to the light. "Ah, your blood," the voice sounded again, sounding very panicked. The blood had firmly wrapped around the light, and the situation was under control. Tang Zheng was worried that there would be other changes, so he rushed into the sky. The moment before he rushed out of the water, he shook his body and returned to his human form. The matter of the dragon clan was confidential, and he did not want outsiders to know. Splash! The water pillar soared into the sky, and with the sound of breaking water, Tang Zheng soared into the air. Everyone uniformly looked at him, staring at the ball of light in his hand that gradually lost its light, revealing its true appearance. Scepter! The great ancestor screamed in shock. His eyes almost popped out as he stared at Tang Zheng's hand. Tang Zheng looked down and was stunned. A scepter was quietly placed in his hand. The scepter was about 1/2 meter long, and it was crystal clear and fiery red. A few simple straight lines ran through the head and tail of the scepter, showing a kind of beauty that was simple to the extreme. Sacred inscriptions. Tang Zheng's eyes lit up. He recognized them at a glance. They were the sacred inscriptions he was familiar with. It also has 3 sacred inscriptions. He stared at the 3 straight lines, comparing them with the sacred inscriptions of his hidden sword. It was hard to tell which one was better. Suddenly, he understood that this sacred weapon was not inferior to the hidden sword. No wonder it was so difficult to deal with. The hidden sword had merged with 2 sacred weapons to become what it was today. It could be imagined how powerful this scepter was. Traces of blood flowed around the scepter, showing signs of seeping into it. Tang Zheng moved his head. This was very similar to the situation of dripping blood to recognize its owner. However, dripping blood to recognize its owner required a corresponding chant. Moreover, the dripping blood had to be the heart's blood and not ordinary blood. However, Tang Zheng's blood also contained a lot of energy. Therefore, when the blood flowed around the scepter, this happened. That's not right. Dripping blood to recognize its owner is a complicated process. It can't be done by just relying on the magic weapon itself. Why would this scepter have such a big reaction? Tang Zheng soon found an unusual clue. Whoosh! After the blood flowed a few rounds, it suddenly flashed and disappeared into the scepter. Bloodthirsty scepter! The great ancestor shouted, his eyes were full of disbelief. His breathing became rapid and his chest rose and fell as he stared at the scepter. As if it had heard those words, the scepter also buzzed and trembled, showing signs of breaking free from Tang Zheng's control. Tang Zheng's head trembled. He understood that he had completely misjudged the situation. After the scepter came into contact with his blood, it was not controlled. Instead, it deliberately stopped and waited for an opportunity to absorb his blood. After all, Tang Zheng was so powerful. His blood was also extraordinary. It was not easy to absorb his blood. Therefore, the scepter deliberately showed weakness to lower Tang Zheng's guard. Then, it took the opportunity to absorb his blood. Once it absorbed the blood, its aura completely changed. The exhaustion from the bitter battle was completely made up, and it emitted a bewitching red light. Stop it quickly. Don't let it escape. The great ancestor shouted anxiously. He seemed to be very afraid of the scepter. Tang Jing felt the scepter trembling more and more violently, as if it was going to break free from his hand. He hurriedly used his power to suppress it. Seeing this, Xiaobai could not bear to let Tang Jing face such a huge threat alone. Without hesitation, he leaped and flew in front of Tang Jing. "Master, let me help you." Tang Jing looked at Xiaobai and his heart moved. This scepter was an item from the sky. Back then, the imperial family had racked their brains to get it. Even so, the imperial family had paid a painful price for it. Xiaobai was a descendant of the imperial family. If he helped the imperial family fulfill their last wish, it would be a blessing. Moreover, the power of the scepter was limitless, and it was an ownerless item. Since Tang Jing already possessed the hidden profound sword, he naturally would not covet this magical treasure. He might as well give it to Little White, allowing him to be like a tiger that had grown wings. It would bring him great benefits in the future. "Xiaobai, drip your blood on it and subdue it," Tang Jing hurriedly said. Xiaobai was stunned. He did not expect Tang Jing to be so generous. He said excitedly, "Master, it's yours to subdue. Don't dawdle. It's struggling more and more. If we let it escape, it will be difficult to catch it," Tang Jing urged. Xiaobai knew that Tang Jing was a man of his word. Since he said so, he could only do as he was told. However, the gratitude in his heart was beyond words. He knew very well how precious this scepter was and how significant it was to the imperial family and to him. Hearing this, the others were stunned, especially the ancestor. He was very clear about the extraordinary meaning of the scepter. Moreover, he knew how powerful the scepter was. Tang Jing did not covet the scepter. Instead, he did not hesitate to let Xiaobai drip his blood on it. This kind of spirit made him feel ashamed of his inferiority. He used to think that Tang Jing was a treacherous villain who deceived Xiaobai. He also wanted to expose his disguise. However, this was a real benefit, and Tang Jing was willing to give it up. This could not be faked at all. If he did not sincerely treat Little White well, how could he be willing to give up such a huge benefit? Suddenly, he looked at Tang Jing with a more complicated gaze. There was a trace of admiration in it. The fog and the others did not know the true use and value of the scepter. However, after experiencing the twists and turns, they knew that the scepter was not ordinary. Seeing that His Majesty had a chance to subdue the scepter, their hearts beat fast. Their eyes were burning as they watched the scene unfold. Xiaobai had already started to drip his blood on the scepter. A drop of blood flew out from his heart. Under the guidance of his fingertip, it flew directly to the scepter. At this moment, the great ancestor seemed to have been struck by lightning. A memory from the deepest part of his mind flashed through his mind, and deep fear surged in his eyes as he shouted, "Your Majesty, quickly stop." The others looked at the great ancestor, who had such an abnormal attitude. They did not understand why he wanted to stop such a good thing. Xiaobai heard the great ancestor, but he did not care. Since his master asked him to drip his blood on the scepter, he would definitely carry out his master's order. On the other hand, Tang Jing frowned. He did not understand the great ancestor's intention. However, the arrow was already on the bow, so he had to do it. Poof! The blood dripped onto the scepter. The red light on the scepter suddenly converged. Then, like an atomic bomb, it expanded outward with a bang. Only the color of blood was left between heaven and earth. Chapter 15-17. Heaven and earth were completely dyed red by this overwhelming blood-red color. Bathed in it, everyone's eyes were red. Even their pupils were dyed red. Tang Jing was apprehensive. He hadn't expected such a huge reaction. He subconsciously recalled how the great ancestor had stopped him a moment ago. Could it be that there was some danger in dripping blood to claim ownership? Xiaobai didn't pay much attention to this. He only remembered to drip blood to claim ownership. After his heart's blood fused with the bloodthirsty scepter, he blurted out the incantation, and a mysterious connection was established between him and the scepter. His body was also dyed red, and a ball of flame rose from his body. It burned fiercely, turning him into a man of fire. Everyone was silent as they stared at him. They knew there was no turning back. They could only wait quietly for the result. The bloodthirsty scepter flew up and shone with a blood-red radiance. It flew into the flames and landed in Tang Zheng's hand. When the bloodthirsty scepter landed in his hand, a ball of blazing red light soared into the sky and merged with the flames. In an instant, the flames seemed to have become even more powerful. Tang Zheng couldn't take his eyes off the scepter. Suddenly, he felt a chill in his heart as a strange energy emerged spontaneously from every corner of his body. This is that lethal poison. He was shocked. When the lethal poison entered his body, he was wholeheartedly focused on the bloodthirsty scepter. He even swore to fight to the death with the scepter. He didn't pay much attention to the lethal poison and even seemed to have gotten used to it. He didn't expect the poison to show its effects now that things had calmed down. He sucked in a breath of cold air and immediately circulated his energy to resist the poison. However, the poison had unknowingly entered every part of his body. "Oh no!" he suddenly shouted. His attention was focused on Yuanying's body. The lethal poison had also infected Yuanying. The nascent soul was even more fragile than him, and it immediately reacted strongly. It struggled to stand up in pain, and he immediately experienced this kind of pain. His body felt like it was being torn apart as tens of thousands of steel needles pierced his body. The feeling was worse than death. He had never cried out in pain before. No matter how serious his injuries were, he could endure it. However, this time, there was no other way. This was inhumane torture. Ah! A heart-wrenching scream rang out, scaring everyone. Only then did everyone notice Tang Zheng's abnormal state. His entire body was emitting waves of black gas. The Grand Ancestor turned pale with fright and shouted, "He's poisoned." Everyone suddenly realized that it must have been when they were underwater. What should they do? The old ancestor was also helpless. In the past, there were others who had been poisoned by this poison, and they would definitely die. There was no medicine that could save them. Otherwise, the imperial family would not have been wiped out. This was the result of the poison being too powerful. Xiao Bai had already completed the blood-binding process. The flames and bloody light around his body had disappeared, and the bloodthirsty scepter was quietly held in his hand. When he saw Tang Zheng's miserable state, he was so scared that his soul almost left his body. He hurriedly said, "Master, I'm here to save you." Tang Zheng's remaining consciousness hurriedly stopped him and said, "Xiao Bai, don't come over. This poison is dangerous." Even he himself had been poisoned. If Xiao Bai were to save him and both of them were poisoned, wouldn't that be a great loss? "No, Master, I must save you," Xiao Bai said stubbornly. His eyes were bright red, and he didn't care about his own life at all. When the Grand Ancestor and the others saw this, they were so scared that their souls almost left their bodies. They cried out, "Your Majesty, don't." However, this time, they couldn't stop Xiao Bai at all. Xiao Bai rushed in front of Tang Zheng and was about to make a move without saying anything. Tang Zheng understood Little White's temper and knew that even if he cried, it would be of no use. He suddenly had an idea, as he had been able to neutralize quite a bit of the poison over the years. Wasn't this also related to the bloodthirsty scepter? Could the bloodthirsty scepter be able to detoxify the poison? Since that was the case, there was hope for him to cure the poison. "Xiao Bai, don't be rash. The bloodthirsty scepter can cure the poison. Think of a way to cure me with the bloodthirsty scepter." "I can still hold on," Tang Zheng shouted. Xiao Bai was startled. He immediately communicated with the bloodthirsty scepter's artifact spirit. "You can cure the poison?" "Yes, Master," the artifact spirit replied, no longer as unruly as before. Xiao Bai was overjoyed. He secretly praised his master's intelligence. He had just seen the pond water being purified. How did he connect it to the bloodthirsty scepter? Then hurry up and save Master, Xiao Bai urged. Yes, Master. The bloodthirsty scepter replied. A bloody light shot out from the scepter and landed on Tang Zhang's chest. Then, the red light spread out like veins and covered Tang Zhang's entire body. Tang Zhang stared blankly at the changes happening to his body. When the bloody light hit him, the pain he felt decreased several times. When the bloody light reached his Yuanying, the Yuanying stopped struggling. It was as if the medicine had cured the disease. The pain had completely disappeared. All of these changes happened too quickly. His poison had completely disappeared, as if it had never appeared in the first place. Tang Zhang looked left and right. He couldn't help but click his tongue in wonder. All of these changes were too inconceivable. His gaze involuntarily fell on the bloodthirsty scepter. This peerless divine weapon was indeed a good item. It could even cure such a powerful poison in such a short time. Xiao Bai looked at Tang Zhang in pleasant surprise. He asked worriedly, Master, how are you? Tang Zhang shook his head. Xiao Bai, thank you. Xiao Bai scratched his head and said embarrassedly, I didn't expect it to be so powerful. With that, he subconsciously stroked the bloodthirsty scepter with his finger. Streaks of bloody light swam around the scepter, rippling unsteadily. When the others saw this, they couldn't help but marvel at the bloodthirsty scepter's power. It was simply a holy item for curing poisons. If they had it back then, dealing with the traitor wouldn't have been so troublesome. They wouldn't have failed back then either. However, the old ancestor's brows were still locked in a frown as if he was worried about something. His gaze wandered between Xiao Bai and the bloodthirsty scepter. Xiao Bai jumped for joy and boasted to the old ancestor. Ancestor, look, I've cured Master. Ancestor, what's wrong? Aren't you happy for me? The patriarch's distressed expression attracted everyone's attention. Everyone looked at him in puzzlement. Only Tang Zhang's head twitched as he remembered that the patriarch had stopped Xiao Bai from dripping his blood to recognize him as the patriarch's master. He asked worriedly, Patriarch, is there a problem with the bloodthirst scepter? The forefather's heart trembled as he inwardly praised Tang Zhang's cleverness. His impression of Tang Zhang had changed a lot, so he didn't have a cold expression on his face. Instead, he nodded worriedly and said, Yes, this bloodthirsty scepter is far more extraordinary than you can imagine. Recklessly dripping blood on it to recognize it as its master, sigh. I'm afraid, it's hard to say whether it's a blessing or a curse. The old ancestor wanted to say something but stopped. His attitude made everyone's heart hang high in the air. To read the latest novel, please visit the website. Chapter 15:18. Hard to explain? Tang Zhang said in a deep voice. Then I'm all ears. Xiao Bai was also very interested in this matter. After all, the bloodthirsty scepter was his treasure. He was interested in everything related to the scepter. Ancestor, hurry up and tell us. Xiao Bai urged. The ancestor looked at Xiao Bai and nodded. Yes, Your Majesty. He paused for a moment to gather his thoughts before continuing. The bloodthirsty scepter is an ancient treasure from the realm beyond heaven. Moreover, this treasure is closely related to the royal family. The scepter symbolizes power. Since ancient times, it has always been the symbol of the royal family. However, many years ago, a tyrant appeared in the royal family. He was addicted to killing. The scepter was stained with the blood of countless people and became the bloodthirsty scepter. It went from being a divine weapon that symbolized power and the royal family to being an ominous item. Everyone was attracted to the bloodthirsty scepter. They didn't expect there to be so many unknown stories about it. Although Xiao Bai had inherited the royal family's memories, he didn't have any memories of the bloodthirsty scepter. From this, it could be seen that not everyone in the royal family knew about the bloodthirsty scepter. The ancestor was well-read. He had a deep understanding of the history and origins of the realm beyond heaven and the royal family. That was why he knew about this matter. Later on, perhaps because the tyrant had killed too many people, he didn't live for long. After the new emperor ascended the throne, he sealed the bloodthirsty scepter. From then on, the bloodthirsty scepter's whereabouts became a mystery. The new emperor worked hard to bring peace to the world. He changed the face of the royal family, and the royal family prospered again. After the death of the new emperor, the bloodthirsty scepter truly disappeared. No one knew where it went. Although the bloodthirsty scepter was an ominous item, it was still a divine weapon. There was no need to doubt its power. Moreover, that tyrant's pursuit of power had reached a crazy level. He refined the bloodthirsty scepter many times, increasing its power again and again. No matter who obtained the bloodthirsty scepter, they would be able to stir up the world. The ancestor sighed. I wonder if that traitor really knew that the bloodthirsty scepter was here or if it was just a coincidence. No. Tang Jing shook his head. From your words, I can conclude that the traitor must be a man who is obsessed with power. If he knew that the bloodthirsty scepter was here, he would have found it no matter what. How could he miss such a great opportunity? The ancestor's eyes lit up, and he couldn't help but look at Tang Jing a few more times. He thought to himself that this kid's mind was really meticulous, and he actually guessed it so accurately. This was also the old ancestor's judgment. All of this was probably just a coincidence. If the late emperor knew that the bloodthirst scepter was buried here, he probably wouldn't have gone through so much trouble to search for the treasure. Although the bloodthirsty scepter could be of great help, it was also very dangerous. The late emperor would not take such a huge risk to let the bloodthirsty scepter see the light of day again. You said that the bloodthirsty scepter is an ominous item. What ominous sign does it have? Tang Jing felt that this was the key to the problem. Since what was done couldn't be undone, it was best to understand what kind of danger the bloodthirsty scepter would cause. It was better to take precautions before it happened. The ancestor's gaze fell upon the bloodthirsty scepter, and he couldn't hide the fear in his eyes. The bloodthirsty scepter will devour its owner and turn him into a ruthless person. In fact, he might even become a tyrant. He looked at Xiao Bai with worry. Xiao Bai felt a chill in his heart. He embarrassedly said, "Ancestor, don't look at me like that. I'm not a tyrant." "Your Majesty, you're not a tyrant now, but if you come into contact with the bloodthirsty scepter for too long, you'll be infected by its ferocity. Then you'll become a tyrant as well." This was what the ancestor was most worried about. He didn't want another tyrant to appear in the royal family. A tyrant wouldn't be able to unite the people's hearts, and he wouldn't be able to take back Sky Beyond Sky from the hands of the traitor's descendant and restore the royal family's former glory. Seeing that the ancestor didn't believe him, Xiao Bai raised his hand and swore. "Xiao Bai, swear today that if I become a tyrant in the future, no, a ruthless person, then I won't need anyone to deal with me. I'll end my own life first. Everyone here can bear witness to this." Xiao Bai made a solemn vow, but it couldn't dispel the ancestor's deep worry. Tang Jing pondered for a long time, then said, "A treasure is a treasure after all. Xiao Bai is its owner. If the owner can't control the treasure, then is he still the owner? Also, I believe that Xiao Bai won't be affected by the bloodthirsty scepter and become a tyrant. Also, with me here, I won't let this happen." The ancestor glanced at him and didn't say a word. It was obvious that he didn't believe his words. Tang Jing didn't care. He didn't care whether the ancestor believed him or not. He would keep his promise. The most important thing was that he believed in Xiao Bai. With the two of them working together, he didn't believe that they wouldn't be able to deal with the bloodthirsty scepter. Xiao Bai looked gratefully at Tang Jing and said with a smile, "Master still understands me the best." Tang Jing squeezed out a faint smile and said, "Ancestor, since the bloodthirsty scepter is so dangerous, why can it also cure poisons? This is the other use of the bloodthirsty scepter." Back then, that tyrant was also a poison expert, but he wasn't limited to that. He also knew how to cure poisons. Moreover, he added a powerful function to the bloodthirsty scepter, and that's detoxification. The bloodthirsty scepter can cure almost all poisons. The ancestor sighed, seemingly amazed by the tyrant's generosity back then. Cure all poisons? Tang Jing sucked in a breath of cold air. This was too powerful. It sounded like bragging, but the truth was right in front of him. He couldn't doubt it at all. With such a divine weapon, he wouldn't have to worry about being poisoned in the future. If the imperial family back then had the bloodthirsty scepter, they wouldn't have to fear the poison of the traitor. History would also be rewritten. In that case, the bloodthirsty scepter isn't completely useless. At least it can cure poisons. In the future, when we meet that traitor's descendant, we won't have to worry about being poisoned again. Tang Zheng said excitedly as if he had discovered a new continent. The ancestor didn't deny this point, but his heavy tone didn't change as he muttered to himself, "In the past, I couldn't understand why most of our strength was deteriorating. Now that the bloodthirsty scepter has appeared, I finally understand. It's true that the bloodthirsty scepter can cure poisons and remove most of the Suicide Valley's poison, but it also affects us, causing our strength to deteriorate bit by bit. This is the benefit it brings to us, and the harm it brings to us." Ah. So it's like that. The ancestor's words made everyone come to a realization. They all looked at the bloodthirsty scepter in Xiao Bai's hands with fear, feeling its ferocious nature even more. They didn't even come into direct contact with the bloodthirsty scepter, but they were all affected. It should be because you drank the water from this waterfall that you were affected quite a bit. Tang Jing pointed at the waterfall and said. It was true that the bloodthirsty scepter was ferocious, but in the end, if the two sides didn't come into direct contact, it would be difficult to affect them. And water was the only medium, which was why this kind of situation occurred. Chapter 15:19. Water. Everyone felt as if they had been hit in the head and immediately understood. The ancestor exclaimed, "I know, most of us have always been in the Suicide Valley and have never left. Only the fog and the night are able to easily hide their whereabouts because of their special cultivation techniques, so every time they go out to scout for information, it's always the two of them. The two of them drank the least amount of water from the waterfall, so naturally, they were the least affected." Everyone secretly nodded. This was the answer. It turned out to be so simple. They originally thought that there was no problem with the purified water. They didn't expect that even though there was no poison, there was still the influence of the bloodthirsty scepter, causing them to be caught off guard. Everyone looked at each other. "I'm a little scared." If they hadn't found out about this problem, then they would have been affected in the future and wouldn't have been able to find out the reason. The fog and the night looked at each other in dismay. They had gone to scout for information and had actually avoided being accidentally injured. It was truly inconceivable. The ancestor glared fiercely at the waterfall and said, "Then we won't be able to drink this water in the future." Unexpectedly, Tang Jing shook his head and said, "No. The bloodthirsty scepter has already been taken out, so it won't be affected. As for the remaining poison, Xiao Bai, after you use the bloodthirsty scepter to detoxify it, everything will be solved." "Alright, I'll start now." Xiao Bai did as he said. The bloodthirsty scepter pointed at the waterfall, a red light shot towards the source of the waterfall, and the water immediately became incomparably clear. Not long after, all the water became clear, without the slightest bit of poison. This change was so fast that it was too much for the eye to take in. Xiao Bai couldn't help but stroke the bloodthirsty scepter. This was truly a good thing, it worked so quickly. From now on, the Suicide Valley would no longer be the Suicide Valley. In fact, even the poison in the outermost area could be completely neutralized in a very short period of time. But why is it that the poison in other places has been neutralized, but this pool and the bloodthirsty scepter are in close contact, yet the poison has not been neutralized? Tang Zheng looked at the waterfall, deep in thought. "Have you been to the top of the waterfall?" Tang Jing pointed at the source of the waterfall and asked. The source of the waterfall was too high. It was as if it had fallen from the sky, and the top was still hidden in the clouds. This was because one couldn't fly in this place. Even after so many years, the great ancestor and the others had never been to the source. After hearing Tang Zheng's question, the ancestor revealed a resentful expression and said, "We can't go up at all. Even if we can't fly up, we still have to climb up." Xiaobai knew what Tang Zheng was thinking. He also wanted to go up and investigate, so he said resolutely. Tang Zheng nodded his head in relief. Xiaobai was never intimidated by difficulties, which was a commendable trait. The patriarch continued to persuade, "This cliff is so high, it's really too dangerous. Your Majesty, why don't we send people up to explore the way first?" Xiaobai said without any trace of politeness, "If you could go up, then you would have gone up long ago. Why wait until now?" The great ancestor's face turned the color of pig liver, but he didn't say anything. Xiaobai realized that his words were too harsh, so he said kindly, "Great ancestor, don't worry, we're not 3-year-old children, how could we really fall to our deaths?" But the great ancestor wanted to persuade again, but he was interrupted by Xiaobai with a wave of his hand. His Majesty had His Majesty. If one of them opposed, then it would damage His Majesty and lose his duty as a subject. "Xiaobai, let's go." Tang Zheng jumped up high and directly climbed the cliff beside the waterfall. The cliff was very wet and slippery, but Tang Zheng's fingers directly grabbed into the rock, so he wasn't worried about falling. Xiaobai did the same, and they quickly climbed to the source of the waterfall. When the others saw this scene, they were so scared that their hearts were in their throats, and they all looked at them. The great ancestor was as anxious as an ant on a hot pan, but there was nothing he could do. The two of them climbed higher and higher, and from the ground, they looked like two small black dots, climbing up bit by bit. Whoosh whoosh. The biting cold wind blew, mixed with the rain, slapping his cheeks with a pa-pa-pa sound. "Xiaobai, if you're tired, let's rest for a while," Tang Zheng suggested. They were all peerless experts, but climbing this waterfall actually made them feel powerless. Their strength was exhausted very quickly, and it was a world of difference from normal. Tang Zheng realized that there was definitely something extraordinary up there, which was why there was such a big impact. It was no wonder that the great ancestor would say something to stop them. It was obvious that he had experienced this before. However, Tang Zheng and Xiaobai were people who wouldn't give up until they reached the Yellow River, so they definitely wouldn't give up. They climbed up a bit more, but it felt like there was no end to it. It was as if there was a shackle on their bodies, and they were getting heavier and heavier. Moreover, their fingers were grabbing into the rock deeper and deeper. If they waited until their fingers couldn't grab into the rock, then it would really be dangerous. Tang Zheng subconsciously looked down and almost couldn't see the people on the ground. He only saw a waterfall flowing down, and it was a spectacular sight. There was no turning back. It was more dangerous going down than going up, and there was absolutely no way to go back the way they came. "Xiaobai, how are you?" Xiaobai shook his head and said, "Master, I can hold on." Tang Zheng stared at Xiaobai's eyes and knew that it was impossible to ask him to go down at this time. Thus, the two of them didn't say anything else and continued to climb up. Gradually, their fingers could grab into the rock less and less. In the end, they could only rely on their fingers to grab onto the protrusions of the rock, and there was no way to grab it at all. Their skills seemed to have been greatly reduced. In addition, the hardness of the rock had greatly increased, which led to this situation. Xiaobai's breathing became hurried. Suddenly, his hand didn't hold firmly, and his fingers slipped, and his body fell down. "Ah!" Xiaobai subconsciously cried out in alarm. Tang Zheng's eyes were sharp and his hands were fast, and he grabbed onto Xiaobai. He only used one hand to grab onto a protrusion of the rock. "Xiaobai, I've caught you. I'll pull you up," Tang Zheng anxiously said. Xiaobai gasped for breath and said, "Master, quickly let go. If you do, you'll fall down with me." At this moment, they were not much different from ordinary people. They couldn't fly, and even their skills were suppressed by a mysterious power. The two of them knew that they had encountered an unprecedented danger and test. The more dangerous it was, the more they had to grit their teeth and persevere. If they took a step back, then perhaps they would fall into a bottomless abyss. They absolutely could not compromise. Xiao Bai, I must pull you up. Tang Zheng persisted. Xiao Bai shook his head. No, master, it doesn't matter if I die, but you can't die. Don't be silly, I won't allow you to die. Without my permission, you must live well for me. We still have to help you take back sky beyond sky. Tang Zheng said excitedly. Xiao Bai's eyes were filled with tears, and he kept shaking his head. No, master, in the next life, you will continue to be my master. Xiao Bai used all his strength to pry open Tang Zheng's fingers. He was like a kite with a broken string, quickly falling down. Xiao Bai. Chapter 15-20. Tang Zheng jumped off the cliff without any hesitation. To him, Xiao Bai was like a family member. He would definitely not watch him die. The wind was bitterly cold, causing people's cheeks to hurt. Xiao Bai and Tang Zheng both knew how to fly. However, at the top of the cliff, even this ability to fly was suppressed. Otherwise, why would they go through so much trouble? On the ground, when everyone saw the scene, they were scared out of their wits. The elder ancestor could not help but shout, "Your Majesty." However, when they saw the scene of Tang Zheng jumping down together, they were all deeply shocked. A person could risk his life to save others. How selfless was this? The elder ancestor could not help but understand Xiao Bai. He could die for Tang Zheng without hesitation, and Tang Zheng could also die for him. This kind of relationship was too precious. However, they did not have time to think about the relationship between the two. What they should do now was the most important thing. Hurry and save them. The elder ancestor roared. His body quickly grew, like a spring bed, trying to catch them. As Xiao Bai fell, he looked at Tang Zheng and shook his head with tears in his eyes. Master, why do you have to do this? For me, it is not worth sacrificing your life. Tang Zheng stared at him with a burning gaze. He grabbed Xiao Bai's hand and said, "You are my family. How can I watch you die? Master, meeting you is Xiao Bai's fortune." Whoosh! Suddenly, a white cloud appeared without warning. Tang Zheng was overjoyed. He shouted, "Somersault cloud!" Whoosh! The somersault cloud immediately flew to their feet. Bang! The two landed on the soft somersault cloud, not suffering any injuries. Wow! Waves of exclamations sounded from the ground. They did not expect that there would be a cloud to catch the two. Wild Dog remembered this cloud. Back in the wildlands, Tang Zheng and Xiao Bai rode on a cloud. At the same time, they were amazed in their hearts. What was the origin of this cloud? It could actually fly freely. Tang Zheng secretly regretted that he had forgotten about the somersault cloud. The somersault cloud was not an ordinary Dharma treasure. In the space of the Langya Pavilion, the somersault cloud could fly freely. Although this suicide valley was very strange, the somersault cloud might be able to fly. Blinded by a single leaf, Tang Zheng made a common mistake. Fortunately, the somersault cloud had automatically saved them at the critical moment, saving them from the danger of being smashed to pieces. Xiao Bai jumped up excitedly and cheered, "Master, we are fine now, all thanks to the somersault cloud." Tang Zheng nodded happily. "Yes, somersault cloud. Thank you." The somersault cloud shook a few times as if it was enjoying their praise. With the somersault cloud, this cliff is no longer unreachable. Tang Zheng was in high spirits. He pointed at the source of the waterfall and commanded, "Somersault cloud, go there." Whoosh! With a piercing sound, the somersault cloud soared into the sky and flew to the source of the waterfall in the blink of an eye. The bright sunlight was dazzling and instantly covered their bodies. The world at the source of the waterfall was bathed in the sunlight, blooming with a dazzling brilliance. Tang Zheng and Xiao Bai widened their eyes and admired the source of the waterfall. The two looked at each other and widened their eyes at the same time. How could this be? Xiao Bai exclaimed. Tang Zheng's shock could be imagined. What kind of place was this? In the past, in their impression, since this was the source of the waterfall and the waterfall had always been highly toxic, this place must be a desolate place. However, what they saw was not like this at all. This was actually a paradise. Here, flowers were blooming, fruits were abundant, vegetation was lush, and the air was unbelievably fresh. It was like a fairyland. Xiao Bai jumped off the somersault cloud and looked around, unable to hide his excitement. Master, this place is much better than below. Moreover, the spirit energy here is very dense. It can allow one's cultivation to increase quickly. Xiao Bai said excitedly. Tang Jing did not comment and said, let's check this place first. This place was like a small mountain. Although the area was not small, they did not spend too much time checking it. The source of the endless waterfall was a spring. Water continuously flowed out of the spring and then flowed down 3,000 feet into the deep pool. The spring water was extremely clear and the poison had been neutralized. Xiao Bai pointed to the spring and said, this waterfall is the source of the poison. After so many years, it has not been neutralized. I guess that the traitor must have poisoned it here. The poisonous water fell from the sky and flowed through every piece of land below, causing this suicide valley to be completely contaminated by the poison. Once my ancestors entered this land, without the antidote, they would immediately be harmed by the poison. Tang Jing nodded his head slightly, admitting that Xiao Bai's analysis was very reasonable. However, he still had a lot of questions in his heart. For example, this was the source of the poison, so why was it flourishing? This did not make sense at all. Xiao Bai also thought of this point. He looked around with a strange expression, shook his head bitterly, and sighed, strange, truly strange. We checked it just now, but we didn't find any clues at all. Tang Zheng said doubtfully. Xiao Bai said, that's right, the vegetation is lush, and there isn't even a bare rock. Oh, no, other than this stubborn rock here, there isn't even a rock anywhere else. Tang Zheng subconsciously looked in the direction of Xiao Bai's finger. There was a rock standing at the mouth of the spring. This rock was about the height of a person and was very inconspicuous. It was no different from an ordinary rock. Huh? Tang Zheng looked at it a few more times, reached out his hand and touched it a few times, and could not help but exclaim, this seems to be a heaven and earth profound stone. Heaven and earth profound stone? Xiao Bai also exclaimed. Xiao Bai was no stranger to heaven and earth profound stone. He quickly touched it a few times, and sure enough, this was really a heaven and earth profound stone. Back then, we searched for so long and only managed to gather 99 pieces of heaven and earth profound stone. I never thought that there would actually be a piece of heaven and earth profound stone here. Could it be that the heaven and earth profound stone came from the sky? Tang Zheng said curiously. No, at least in my memory, there is no heaven and earth profound stone. Xiao Bai immediately retorted, perhaps, when the elder ancestor comes up later, we can ask him. The heaven and earth profound stone is very useful to us. Moreover, the heaven and earth profound stone is related to the stairway to heaven. If other people use it to build the stairway to heaven, then wouldn't it completely connect the two worlds? This is temporarily not beneficial to us. Master, you want to keep this heaven and earth profound stone to prevent it from falling into the hands of others? Xiao Bai understood Tang Zheng's thoughts. Tang Zheng smiled, reached out his hand and touched the stubborn rock. His wrist lit up, this was the Sumera heavens taking effect, trying to keep it. However, the stubborn rock did not move at all. The light of the Sumera heavens completely enveloped it, but it was completely useless. To read the latest novel, please visit the website. Chapter 1521. This miraculous scene completely stunned Tang Zheng and Little White. They stared at each other with their eyes wide open, as they did not expect such an outcome. Xiao Bai exclaimed, "Master, why don't I pick it up first?" He hugged the stone without any explanation and grimaced. He seemed to have used all his strength, but it did not move at all. This stone seemed to be connected to the earth and could not be moved at all. Xiao Bai dejectedly circled the stone twice and clicked his tongue in wonder. Strange, this stone does not look big, but I can't pick it up. Tang Zheng's eyes were like lightning. Suddenly, he took out the hidden profound sword and slashed at the stone. Sparks flew everywhere, but the stone was not damaged at all. Hiss! He sucked in a breath of cold air. A peerless divine weapon like the hidden profound sword could not even leave a mark on the stone. Xiao Bai was also shocked and said, "Master, how can this be? This heaven and earth or is not ordinary. It is quite different from the heaven and earth or we have seen before." Tang Zheng pondered for a long time and said. Xiao Bai nodded in agreement. "Then what should we do?" "Don't worry about it for now. It is a stone after all, a dead object. It is not related to the big picture." Tang Zheng had no choice but to give up. Little White unwillingly looked at the mischievous rock a few times, but could only resentfully give up. Looking around, it changed the topic and said, "There are flowers and fruits here, it's simply a mountain of flowers and fruits." Tang Zheng laughed involuntarily. "Then why don't we call it Mountain of Flowers and Fruits?" Mountain of Flowers and Fruits, a good name. Xiao Bai's eyes lit up. Suicide Valley, this name is too unpleasant to hear. From now on, this place will be called Mountain of Flowers and Fruits. The two stepped on the somersault cloud and flew back to the waterfall. Everyone hurriedly greeted them and looked at them and the somersault cloud in surprise. The two briefly explained what they saw at the source of the waterfall. Everyone was amazed and wanted to go up and investigate. But they could not go up by themselves, so they looked at Tang Zheng and the somersault cloud. Especially the somersault cloud, which had given them a huge shock. Their transcendent artifacts were unable to fly in the air, but this white cloud could fly without any hindrance. It completely outclassed their transcendent artifacts, and they couldn't help but be convinced. Somersault cloud, change. Tang Zheng smiled faintly and shouted. The somersault cloud expanded rapidly and occupied more than half of the area below the waterfall. "Come on up." Everyone looked at each other. Then, they boarded the somersault cloud with excitement and caution. The somersault cloud whizzed past and flew directly to Huagua Mountain. When everyone stepped foot on this piece of land, they looked left and right in amazement. A moment later, everyone returned to the mischievous rock. All of them clicked their tongues in wonder. The place where they had lived for so many years actually had such a place. It was truly unexpected. "I don't think there's anything special about it." Mist pouted and said with disappointment. The old ancestor's eyes were deep as he swept his gaze around and said, "Fog, you're wrong. This place is even more mysterious than below. Don't you realize that after coming here, your powers are greatly restricted?" "Huh." After the old ancestor's reminder, everyone also noticed some clues. When they were under the waterfall, although they couldn't fly in the air, their powers weren't restricted. The battle was still very smooth. But at this moment, they had actually become like ordinary people. They couldn't even circulate their powers normally. This is too strange. Wild Dog smacked his lips and exclaimed. The world was big and there were all kinds of strange things. This time, they had really broadened their horizons. The scenery above is good and the spiritual energy is abundant. Why don't you live here? It's better than the darkness below. Xiao Bai suggested. The old ancestor said with a troubled expression, Your Majesty, although this suggestion is good, it is not realistic. We can't fly in the air, so it's very difficult to go up and down. Therefore, it's more convenient to live under the waterfall. Xiao Bai patted his head and said resentfully, That's right, I almost forgot the most important point. However, to be able to come here in my lifetime, it can be considered as fulfilling a wish. The old ancestor said with relief. This place will be called Mountain of Flowers and Fruit from now on, and this Suicide Valley will also be changed to Mountain of Flowers and Fruit. The name Suicide Valley sounds too strange, Xiao Bai said with certainty. The others naturally had no objections. There was nothing else on the mountain, so everyone naturally returned to the bottom of the waterfall. Now that the divine armament Bloodthirsty Scepter had become Xiao Bai's magic treasure, the poison on this land could be dispelled at any time, so they could leave this land at any time. However, the old ancestor did not leave, because the outside world was too dangerous. Moreover, they were not prepared to fight against the traitor forces. Xiao Bai was very clear about this point. Although the old ancestor insisted on letting Xiao Bai lead everyone to fight against the traitor forces, Xiao Bai refused without hesitation. He did not want his people to die in vain. Only by knowing yourself and knowing your enemy can you win 100 battles. He still wanted to go to the enemy's territory to find out more before making a decision. The old ancestor was very gratified by Xiao Bai's calm way of doing things, but he was also very ashamed. After all, after so many years, His Majesty had returned, and he was not ready. Xiao Bai comforted him for a long time before dispelling the old ancestor's thoughts. Time was of the essence. Tang Zheng had been away from the human world for too long. In order to avoid a fire in his backyard, he had to return to the human world as soon as possible. The old ancestor couldn't persuade Xiao Bai, so he compromised and said, "Your Majesty, if no one serves you with your identity, wouldn't we not be fulfilling our duties? Therefore, let the fog follow you. She has been outside a few times, and with her around, it should be more convenient for her to do things." This. Xiao Bai didn't know how to refuse, so he turned to look at Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng thoughtfully looked at the fog and nodded his head without leaving a trace. With the fog as a guide, they might be able to avoid some trouble. Xiao Bai reluctantly said, "All right then." Only then did the old ancestor heave a sigh of relief. If he really let Xiao Bai and the others leave alone, he would probably continue to blame himself. "You guys stay here and don't go outside for the time being. Wait for our news," Xiao Bai warned. Feeling Xiao Bai's concern, the old ancestor said excitedly, "Your Majesty, please rest assured. We have been hiding here for so many years. It will not be so easy for the enemy to find us." Under everyone's gaze, Tang Zheng, Xiao Bai, the fog, and the wild dog all left. They came in a hurry and left in a hurry. They stayed here for less than a day. With the Bloodthirsty Scepter, it was very convenient for them to leave Suicide Valley. Moreover, Xiao Bai could open up a secluded path for them to enter and exit without being affected by the poison. Of course, this path was very hidden and was not easy to be discovered by outsiders. It was also covered with various divine abilities to ensure that nothing would go wrong. Chapter 1522. Looking from afar, the imperial city was magnificent. It stood tall between the heavens and the earth. It was so vast that one could not see the end of it. The buildings of different heights were stacked on top of each other, blocking a lot of sight. There was no way to see all the corners clearly. The imperial city was a no-fly zone. Other than the imperial family and the imperial guards, no one else was allowed to fly. Otherwise, if they were discovered, they would be executed. This was to ensure the safety of the imperial city. The fog had been to the imperial city before and was familiar with the place. He warned them and they all remembered it. Although Wild Dog had lived in the outer sky for hundreds of years, he had only seen the imperial city from afar. He had never dared to enter. That would be walking right into a trap. But no one dared to do that. Wild Dog looked around guiltily and said nervously, "Senior, it's too dangerous for us to go in like this." After witnessing Tang Zheng's various tricks and techniques, Wild Dog did not dare to act rashly in front of him. Originally, Wild Dog's ugly face always attracted people's attention. But when they were about to reach the imperial city, no one paid attention to him. Because his ugliness paled in comparison. The people on the road were much uglier than him. The royal city was the core of the outer sky, and there were countless races that came and went. Many of these races didn't fully transform into human form, so their appearances were all strange. Wild dogs, on the other hand, were much more pleasing to the eye. Wild Dog could not help but straighten his body, raising his eyebrows and exhaling. The tension all over his body seemed to relax a lot, and this place could not help but have a trace of friendliness and naturalness. The fog said in a low voice, "Everyone, the imperial city is heavily guarded. Although the traitor has taken over the world, his descendants still feel uneasy. They are very cautious." What's the point of living in fear like this? Tang Zheng curled his lips and said jokingly. Xiao Bai looked at the imperial city angrily. In the middle of the imperial city, there was a pillar of light that shot up to the sky. At the top of the pillar, there seemed to be a building, but it was not clear. I will make them live in fear in the days to come. In fact, they will be scared out of their wits. Xiao Bai suppressed his anger and roared like a wild beast. Tang Zheng patted Xiao Bai's shoulder and said, "Their carefree days are over. Don't worry, we will definitely take back everything that belongs to you." Xiao Bai nodded heavily and pointed to the top of the light pillar, where the clouds and mist lingered, that is the core of the imperial city, the imperial palace. When Tang Zheng saw this for the first time, he couldn't help but be shocked. The heavens beyond heaven's imperial palace was built in the clouds. Then let's make Sky City. The mist introduced. Everyone in the outer heaven knew about Sky City's illustrious reputation because it was located high in the clouds, looking down on all living beings in the world. What a magical place. Tang Zheng couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. He recalled the mountain peak that he saw floating in midair. It seemed that things in the beyond heaven liked to develop in the sky. The few of them carefully passed through layers upon layers of checks before they entered the imperial city. The imperial city was a mixed bag of good and bad people, so it wasn't difficult to sneak in. This inspection seems to be stricter. The mist said doubtfully. Of course they are strict. Because, they already know that the imperial family has returned. Naturally, they are facing a great enemy. Tang Zheng said without surprise. Last time, when he and Xiao Bai's consciousness crossed over, they used the identity of the imperial family to scare off the enemy. Naturally, the people in Sky City also knew. That's why they mustered so many people, wanting to get information from the righteous cultivators. It was a pity that those people didn't know anything. It was precisely because of this that they were more worried. The fear of the unknown was truly frightening. On both sides of the street, there were many shops, but every face was more or less nervous and fearful. The corners of their eyes kept glancing around, as if they were afraid that something would happen. Boom, boom, boom. Suddenly, there was the sound of stairs. Everyone scattered like birds and beasts, retreating to the sides of the street. The mist hurriedly pulled the few of them to a corner. Several pairs of eyes looked warily at the direction of the wind where the sound came from. A few gigantic unicorns that were neither donkeys nor horses, their bodies covered in scales that glittered with cold light, were charging straight towards them. Riding on the unicorns were several majestic-looking, tall and strong fellows that were wrapped in armor from head to toe. A guy who looked like a commander pointed his finger in a direction. His subordinates flew up from their mounts and flocked to the place where his finger pointed. They stood in front of the few passers-by and directly grabbed them without asking any questions. "Ah, spare us, Lord City Guard, we are all His Majesty's subjects, not the opposition." The few of them cried out. However, it was of no use. They were still dragged away like dragging dead dogs. Then, they were hung on the backs of their mounts and dragged on the street. No one dared to resist. Instead, they kept shrinking into the corner, as if they were afraid that bad luck would befall them. Seeing this, Xiao Bai clenched his fists. He could no longer control his anger and wanted to rush over to stop all this. Mist hurriedly pulled him back and anxiously shook her head. She advised, "Your Majesty, don't. These are all city guards." They are responsible for patrolling the imperial city. If you provoke them, a large number of city guards will come immediately. Even the imperial guards will be summoned. At that time, we will be in danger in the imperial city. Are we just going to watch them do violence? Xiao Bai asked. This is not the first time, but what can we do? In the future, when His Majesty takes back the Outland, all this will naturally be put to an end. Mist said earnestly, constantly hinting at Tang Zheng with her eyes. She knew very well that only when Tang Zheng gave the order, Xiao Bai would listen to it. Tang Zheng, on the other hand, stared at the scene without blinking, not saying a word. Wild Dog said calmly, what is there to be surprised about? In the Outland, except for the royal family and the nobles, the rest are ants. They can kill and rob at will. This has been going on for many years. Whitey glared fiercely at the Wild Dog. Wild Dog's heart trembled. He hurriedly shrank his neck and said stubbornly, I am telling the truth. I have traveled far and wide and have seen too many of these things. Tang Zheng had been silent. His eyes were fixed on the scene on the street. Without a doubt, looking at the adept manner of the other party, this was not the first time. Wild Dog was definitely not lying. Now, the official was really unscrupulous and so violent. Since this was the case, it laid a solid foundation for Xiao Bai's return. The one who wins the hearts of the people controls the world. Perhaps the people in power did not understand the true meaning of this sentence. Xiao Bai, don't be impulsive. We have more important things to do. The crimes they have committed, we will remember them. Justice will come eventually, it is just late. Moreover, justice will come soon. Tang Zheng finally opened his mouth. Xiao Bai's momentum suddenly dropped. He took a deep breath and suppressed his anger. He knew that his master was farsighted and he was too rash. He gritted his teeth, and all his anger passed from the soles of his feet to the rocks on the ground. Crack, crack, crack. The rocks cracked inch by inch, reaching deep into the ground. In order to avoid being discovered, they left the street from a remote place without leaving a trace. As soon as they left, the group of city guards rushed to the place where they had just stood. Awoo! Suddenly, the mount raised its front hooves high. Half of its body was pulled up by its master and it stopped. Bang! The city guard jumped off his mount and landed in front of Xiao Bai. His eyes were bright and full of expression, as if there were lightning flashing. He stared straight at the cracked stone slabs. To read the latest novel, please visit the website. Chapter 1523. The city guard's eyes were like torches as he stared at the cracked ground. With a point of his finger, a ray of light landed on the ground, and a huge hole was torn open, revealing what was below. It had completely melted and turned into magma, emitting a blazing aura. The other city guards exclaimed and asked in surprise, Sir, what's going on? The city guard's eyes were deep, and there was a trace of imperceptible fear in his eyes. He pondered for a long time without saying a word. Only he knew that the imperial family had returned. The rumor was indeed true. The imperial family had really returned. Only the imperial family could do this. The legendary flame that could burn everything in the world looked like this. He took a deep breath and suppressed the fear in his heart. He had never seen the imperial family, but he had heard a lot of rumors about them. The more the government suppressed them, the more there was a market for such rumors. Therefore, as the city guard, he knew more details than others. He also knew that the current His Majesty did not rightfully possess all that he had today. He straightened his body, glanced at his subordinates majestically, and ordered, Pass down my order. Seal off this street and arrest all suspicious people. He did not need to give a reason at all. As soon as the order was passed down, the street was immediately in chaos, and screams of alarm rose and fell. Many innocent people were arrested. Fortunately, Tang Zheng and the others left in time. Otherwise, there would definitely be a conflict with them. The city guard did not even look at those who were arrested. He also knew that the imperial family he was looking for was definitely not among them. He only did this to report to his superiors. He hurriedly rushed in the direction of Sky City. His mount rampaged, and his rumbling footsteps resounded through the streets. Everywhere he passed, pedestrians avoided him. After a while, he arrived at a huge building. This building was located directly below Sky City, and the light pillar that connected Sky City to the sky came from here. This building was heavily guarded, and outsiders could not get close at all. Not long after, the light pillar's light increased greatly, and many people went straight to Sky City from the light pillar and disappeared from Sky City. Tang Zheng and the others came not far from this building without anyone noticing and saw this scene from afar. Did they go to Sky City from here? Tang Zheng asked curiously. Flying was forbidden in the imperial city, unless one was a noble or a member of the imperial family. Especially below the imperial family, even the nobles were not allowed to fly. As a result, if the nobles wanted to enter the Sky Castle, they could only rely on this pillar of light. The light pillar was similar to an elevator in the human world, instantly transporting people to Sky City. It was convenient, fast, and easy to manage. The mist explained, "Your guess is correct. This is the only way for people other than the royal family to enter Sky City. Random people can't enter Sky City at all." Tang Jing frowned. If they couldn't reach Sky City, wouldn't they have to return empty-handed? Should I barge in and force my way into Sky City? In this way, they would be completely exposed. Tang Zheng was not so arrogant as to think that he could dominate the imperial city with just these few people. Xiao Bai looked deeply into Tang Zheng's eyes. He understood the worry in his heart and said, "Master, don't worry. I already have a plan." "A plan?" Tang Zheng looked at him in surprise. Xiao Bai pointed at his head proudly and said, "The memories I inherited are a precious treasure. Among them is a way to reach Sky City without anyone knowing." Tang Zheng raised his thick eyebrows, overjoyed. "Is that so?" Xiao Bai nodded heavily. "Of course." After a pause, he deliberately said mysteriously, "Just follow me." Tang Zheng knew very well that Xiao Bai was not one to lie. He must be very confident, so he signaled to the other two and followed Xiao Bai's footsteps, bypassing the magnificent building in front of them. The few of them avoided the crowd, walking more and more remote, to the point that there was a gloomy feeling. Wild Dog subconsciously tightened his clothes and asked curiously, "Where are we going? Why do I feel so gloomy, like we've come to a cemetery?" Unknowingly, Xiao Bai's expression had become very serious and dignified. After listening to Wild Dog's words, he solemnly said, "This is the cemetery of the royal family. Don't talk nonsense and tarnish the ancestors of the royal family." Wild Dog subconsciously withdrew his tongue, looked around, and said bitterly, "I see, I definitely don't mean to disrespect the ancestors of the royal family." Looking at Xiao Bai's expression, Tang Zheng understood Xiao Bai's mood. This was equivalent to the history of the royal family, the place where many of the royal family members were buried. As a descendant of the royal family, Xiao Bai's mood was heavy as one could imagine. The atmosphere suddenly became serious. Suddenly, Xiao Bai's footsteps stopped, his eyes almost spewing fire, staring angrily in front. "What's wrong?" Tang Zheng asked, looking forward. His heart suddenly tightened, and he stared in front of him dumbfounded. Hiss! Everyone sucked in a cold breath. What did they see? They saw many broken tombstones lying in the mud. The handwriting on them had long been covered with mud and could not be recognized at all. This large graveyard was like this, causing people to tremble in fear. For Xiao Bai, this was the fuse that ignited the anger in his heart. He was so angry that his whole body trembled, his feet seemed to be filled with lead, and he walked step by step towards the cemetery. The cemetery has been completely destroyed. Wild Dog was speechless, unable to believe the scene in front of him. Without a doubt, this must be the many crimes that the traitor had committed. Not only did he not let the living royal family go, he did not even let the dead royal family go. He actually destroyed the graves of the royal family. In fact, this was not hard to imagine. In order to consolidate his position, the traitor had to destroy the prestige of the royal family to the greatest extent. Destroying the graves of the royal family was equivalent to destroying the roots of the royal family. This did not require too much effort, and the results were obvious. Naturally, it was his first choice. Moreover, this could also deter others. Even the royal family's cemetery was not bad, so if others wanted to go against him, they would naturally have to weigh their own strength. Xiao Bai lifted a tombstone from the mud and gently wiped the mud off it, his hands trembling. "I will kill the descendants of that traitor and make them pay with blood," Xiao Bai said through gritted teeth, his hands clenched so tightly that his nails dug into his hands, but he did not notice. Tang Zheng held his shoulder and comforted him. "We will definitely take back everything that belongs to the royal family." Xiao Bai put down the tombstone and strode into the depths of the tombstone. The light around him was getting darker and darker, and several people followed his footsteps. Xiao Bai stopped, his mouth muttering an obscure and difficult to understand chant. His hands flipped, and one after another, he slapped the void. Boom! A door opened with a bang. "This is the transmission formation to Sky City, the secret passage for our royal family to worship our ancestors. Apart from the royal family, no one else will know. It is absolutely safe." To read the latest novel, please visit Chapter 1524. Teleportation Array. Everyone was overjoyed. With this passage, they would be able to reach Sky City without anyone noticing. They wouldn't have to return empty-handed. The group immediately stepped through the door and arrived at another place in the next second. They were in ruins, but from the ruins, it could be seen that this place used to be very grand and extraordinary. Xiao Bai gnashed his teeth, his eyes almost spitting fire as he said, "This is the royal family's ancestral shrine, but it was destroyed by that traitor. That traitor not only destroyed the royal family's tombs, he didn't even let the ancestral shrine go. He was unscrupulous." They didn't see any other traces of people in the ruins, which made it easy for them to hide their tracks. What entered their eyes was a magnificent group of palaces. It was impossible to imagine what it looked like from the ground. Only when they were in it did they understand how magnificent Sky City was. It was several times larger than the imperial city in the human world. A person in it was like a grain of sand falling into a pile of sand, inconspicuous at all. Xiao Bai had detailed information about Sky City's layout in his memories. However, after so many years, who knew how much had changed? Thus, they didn't dare to be brazen and carefully advanced towards the core of Sky City. Gradually, they saw pairs of patrolling Imperial guards. These Imperial guards were all holding magic weapons and riding strange beasts. They were strict and orderly, patrolling Sky City from above. Outside Sky City were the city guards patrolling, and inside Sky City were the Imperial guards. Both forces couldn't be underestimated. Although Fog had come to the Imperial City several times to gather information, she had never gone up to Sky City. It was simply too dangerous. Moreover, she didn't have a way to silently come up. "This time, we must catch that traitor's trusted aide. If we can catch the guy on the throne, that would naturally be the best," Tang Zheng said in a deep voice. After that traitor seized the world, he also openly proclaimed himself king and gave himself the title of Hao Tianwang. His descendant, who was the person on the throne, gave himself the title of King Wuling. All of this was told to them by Fog. King Wuling lived in seclusion, and very few people had seen his true face. It was indeed not an easy task to find King Wuling in this vast complex of buildings. Tang Zheng suddenly had an idea and said, "Maybe it's not that hard. I can catch a guard and use the soul-searching technique on him. Then we'll know all the answers." The soul-searching art was the Devil Clan's art, and Wild Dog was no stranger to it. He was very surprised that Tang Zheng knew the soul-searching art. But the Wild Dog tactfully did not say a word. The Fog did not know about the soul-searching technique. She frowned and looked at him curiously. At this time, a group of patrolling Imperial guards happened to pass by. Tang Jing quietly rushed out, the hidden sword lightly slit their throats, and several Imperial guards immediately lost their lives. Then, he spared the life of one of the Imperial guards. His big hand grabbed the other's head, and a lot of information flowed into his brain like a tide. His eyes lit up. These Imperial guards really knew a lot of information. He already knew that the palace where King Wuling lived was still some distance away. Those few mounts wanted to resist, but they were also taken care of by Tang Jing. He used the sky-swallowing technique to suck them into the black hole, turning them into energy in the heaven realm. Wear their clothes and armor, and change into their appearance. This way, we can avoid exposing ourselves as much as possible. Tang Jing advised. The transformation technique was not complicated for them. They all changed into the appearance of the dead Imperial guards, and patrolled the city like they were supposed to. With the expert Tang Jing and Xiao Bai who were familiar with the road, the two of them worked together, and with the disguise, they easily avoided most of the Imperial guards. Step by step, they went deep into the heart of Sky City. It's really strange. Although Sky City's security is tight, there are more loopholes to take advantage of than the Imperial City. After walking around, Tang Jing clicked his tongue in wonder. Fog was not surprised and said, "The number of Imperial guards is limited. Only the most important people can become Imperial guards, but the number of city guards is many times more, and the people are mixed together. So, the city guards have enough manpower to control the streets, but the Imperial guards can't do this. Moreover, I'm afraid that King Wuling would never dream that we could quietly reach Sky City, which caused the situation to be tight on the outside and loose on the inside." Tang Jing gave Bewilderment Fog a deep look as her analysis was clear and logical. She was quite smart. Hey, why is the security here so much tighter than other places? Suddenly, they stopped and looked at a nearby palace. They had not reached King Wuling's palace yet. Along the way, there were many palaces, but the guards were mostly the same, and there was nothing too out of the ordinary. But this palace was different. Moreover, this palace was completely black and lacked the magnificence of other palaces, giving people an inexplicable sense of oppression. "What kind of palace is this?" Tang Jing asked Xiao Bai. Xiao Bai tilted his head and looked at it for a while before shaking his head and saying, "This palace is newly built. In my memory, this palace does not look like this." "A newly built palace?" "The Imperial guards are so strict, so there must be something unusual about it," Tang Jing said thoughtfully. Everyone nodded inwardly, thinking that this made sense. They all looked at the palace and saw the words Lunar Temple written on the plaque. "Then let's go in first and see if there are any unexpected gains," Tang Jing thought and said. The others looked at each other and did not have any objections. "Okay, let's go in." These people looked like Imperial guards. They walked into Lunar Temple as usual. However, an angry roar sounded. "Stop! Are you all blind? This is Lunar Temple, not other palaces. How can you come and go as you please?" A few Imperial guards blocked their way. They looked ferocious as if they were about to kill them. Tang Jing shivered. From this, it seemed that this Lunar Temple was even more unusual than they had imagined. Since this was the case, then they could not give up like this. He did not panic and said calmly, "We are here to help. Recently, the Imperial City has not been peaceful, so we received orders to increase the defense of Lunar Temple." "Whose orders?" The Imperial guards were skeptical. "His Majesty's orders." "Nonsense, how could we not know His Majesty's orders?" The other side was enraged and their expressions immediately changed. "Who are you, daring to intrude into Lunar Temple? How audacious, take them down." With this order, the Imperial guards swarmed over. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The hidden profound sword flew up and several sword lights fell around the palace. In an instant, a restriction was quietly activated around the palace. Restriction. Tang Zheng hurriedly set up a restriction. Restriction was a type of array that could isolate the outside world for hundreds or thousands of years, just like the restriction on Mount Buzhou that had isolated the Hundred Faces Star Sovereign from the outside world for tens of thousands of years. However, Tang Zheng's restriction was not that strong and could only isolate the outside world for a period of time to buy them more time. They all understood Tang Zheng's intention. Since they were already here, they might as well take things as they came. No one retreated. In fact, even the weakest wild dog's face was flushed red and he became excited. At this moment, the Imperial Guards rushed in front of them. These Imperial Guards were not weak. Most of them were in the Soul Formation realm, similar to the Fog, but far stronger than Wild Dog. However, with Tang Zheng and Xiao Bai, two Mahayana realm experts, these Imperial Guards were naturally like chickens and dogs. Before the Imperial Guards rushed in front of them, Tang Zheng's sword had already slashed their necks. Blood splattered and their heads were separated from their bodies. Kill. To read the latest novel, please visit the website. You're tuning into the A Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.